5:09, December 23rd, calling the select board meeting to order. First item is consider additions or adjustments. Are there any? Next item is budget update. So I guess we can get right into that.
So, today,
Can I just say one thing? There's not
A public
article
comment.
on here about public comment, and I think we have to do that. We should do that.
I was thinking about it.
oh yeah, that was not on the list of things.
We can- Add space for public comment
What do we want to talk about articles?
under articles.
Okay. Because
Item number-
change, if there's a change, you still want
Item number 3.
to, okay. We'll stick that in.
All right. No other additions or adjustments. Is there any public comment?
I don't have.
Seeing none. Now we will get into the budget. What were you saying, Tom?
So, I sat down today with Rosemary. A lot of this year's budget was tied up with accounting. We had to clean up old accounts, we had to add reserve fund revenue, and we had to create the fund accounts that Duncan had suggested last week. And because of that, we were able to reduce the budget by 3 points, or
Thank you.
by quite a lot. At the end of that, we got down to 4.57% increase over last year, just by doing the accounting. Which is a tax rate of 0.9484 or $948.40 per 100,000 valued. Last year was 0.9026. And so with that, Rosemary, myself, and Mark called right at the right time. We were able to immediately find $30,000 to reduce the amount to be raised in taxes. These will take board action, and they are shown on line 44, obligated funds. But in that line, we have any money to be proposed for paving next year. Jason wants to do some paving, and we're working on that paving plan. And he has concept to a few roads. Wilson Road is one of them, down to the bridge. And I threw in some numbers just to hope for placeholders, but that's what that is that, say it's a $200,000 project. We have $122,000 from this year going into that reserve fund. That's shown as expended for the estimated final, but we didn't have the reserve fund created to show that money coming back for that project. So we have expended the $122,000 in FY26, but we never showed where that additional money would go to help with that paving project. And this is where Rosemary suggested that go in. I threw in 78,000 just based on an off the cuff estimate from an earlier conversation back in November. But
With Jason?
yeah, this was about, we talked to, when Duncan first brought up a paving plan, I think it was early November when we first started the budget project. Jason and I went over what he wanted to pave then and just threw together stuff off the cuff. When I spoke to him this morning, was not comfortable with creating a number, and that he needs to get, there's so much fluctuation. He needs to get a better price, but the idea would be to start with Wilson Road. And I threw in $200,000 as costs based on that. And then, but the point is that $78,000 to do that job was not shown anywhere. And so we were going to take money in, but it wasn't shown in our budget. And so that reduces the amount to be raised by taxes by 78,000. So this is very quick. And I want to make sure that that's the right number, and we want to make sure that we're going to pave next summer. So that's temporary. But also in that line, the $30,000 that I was mentioning earlier, we can reduce the budget by $9,650, and that's by pulling from our audit reserves, which is currently at $46,923. And so if we pay the audit through the audit reserve versus raising taxes, that lowers it that amount. The second amount we found was $10,708, which is reserved for other purposes. This was reserved from unexpended funds from a previous year that wasn't allocated. And Rosemary suggested we use that this year. That would also show in that same line, obligated funds. And lastly, Jason has called, I'm not sure how many of you guys he's talked to. He wanted to buy a boom mower for our tractor. Our disc bank mower broke and is no longer relevant with our current ditch style. And he found one for sale for $3,500. We have $5,000 in our small equipment purchase fund. And so that could fall, if he does that right away, like we make the motion tonight and he buys that. It means next year, we will no longer have to rent a tractor or a boom mower, reducing that line to zero from $11,000. So that lowers the budget by $11,000 there.
And Jason feels like this is something that's gonna hold up.
That's what
It's really cheap to me.
I can only trust him. I mean, it's a Diamond mower. Diamond is top of the line. It's the same brand that they currently rent. So
But it's a flail mower, not a,
Yeah.
just save a little bit. That,
Can't even
that
buy a
low is
large one.
surprising.
Where is it?
New York,
Oh, that's the problem.
and I'm just throwing out the idea. That reduces a significant amount. And so whether we buy it.
I like owning versus
You know,
renting, but
so say we buy a different one, brand new one, the same mower, brand new is 25,000. So say we buy a brand new mower. Okay, we do it. We still save in 2.5 years, we're gonna recover that cost. So I think whether you buy that mower and at used or buy it new, I think it's probably a good idea to buy it this spring before we go into next year's mowing season. Rather than keep renting.
Is that in the capital budget? Fund for the highway department, a boom mower, and it's out there.
I assuming that's the mower for Kubota. But that would be replacing. But no, we don't. There's nothing in there for that. I feel like we're getting into asking for a motion for a purchase that wasn't really presented to me. I love the idea of it.
These are just
I
concepts.
just don't know. As far as the high level review, are there other things you wanted to go over or highlight?
That's really where we're at.
I
If
do,
you were to accept those 3 adjustments for $30,000. That brings our increase to 3.165%. And a tax rate of 0.9357 or $935.70 per 100,000 as opposed to the $902.60. So that's a $35 per 100,000 increase on our taxes.
Mr. Chairman, I want to go back to that mower just for a second, seeing we were discussing it. How long is this going to be good for, this price?
I don't know that it's very, when I called him tonight, like, I realized I'm scrambling up here, but I called him and hung it up at like 4:50. He said if it's still available. I think it started off at 6,000 and then they dropped it right away, so. He talked to the person last week. I think he talked to you about this, didn't he?
yeah, you mentioned it,
So what were the details he gave you?
a picture of it on Facebook Marketplace. I don't have a ton of details. He said it could save the town money if we bought it. I can read the string if you want.
So he's reasonably certain it's not all beat up.
I mean, obviously, he would have to go and look at it. But from the pictures that he showed me, we talked about it. It looks like all the hydraulic lines are well protected and
How
I
far away is it?
don't know. It's in,
Well, to me, whether or not that this was part of the discussion or not, way back when, if this is this kind of savings on it, and this is in relatively good shape, it would be stupid for us not to buy it.
the paint looks immaculate, but you know.
I know,
You
can
can paint
always,
anything.
you
yeah.
can always throw a coat of paint on something.
There you go,
You
yeah.
know, paint covers a multitude of sins, but my point is that as expensive as those are. And if it is in good shape, we should jump on it.
So I think, you know, we have $5,000 that we set aside to what we call a small equipment purchase. We didn't set aside, but we budget $5,000 for it. And I think we were to use that, it wouldn't increase. We wouldn't increase it any more time, you know. We already budgeted, we already have it planned in our estimated final to be 5,000. If you use that $5,000 towards this mower, it's a way that we wouldn't increase. We wouldn't go over budget and we wouldn't increase next year's taxes. We'd be lowering it by $11,000. We need to come up with about 30 to 50,000 to bring it down to the target that we want, right?
Which is what?
That's, well, I mean, we haven't decided. There was never a vote, but it was said several times, 2.5%, and without better direction, it's all I got, so.
I just wanted to point that out, that we've never, I know you said you'd like to see it at 2.5%. I don't know, we as a board have ever voted on what we wanna.
No, I just threw it out. It was kind of pie in the sky.
Yeah.
See,
know,
yeah,
it's-
But I agreed with you.
Yeah, you did.
the
We can
CP,
make it higher.
the CPI increase that we gave, that we're budgeting for employees for raises in 13 months, right now is 3.5%, but I don't know if we're shooting for a target or if we want to go over some items. As far as the boom mower goes, the board could make a motion not to exceed a certain amount, but it's not really warned as a purchase and we didn't do it as an additional item at the beginning. What
This
is,
is very last minute, and I don't know the best process to allow Jason the ability to inquire, but still following the purchasing policy. But
Yes,
you know, that's the thing, is like, how do we do both, right? Without using X number of man laborers to go drive all the way, man hours to go over there and look at it. You know, so
well,
that's,
I think he should look at it and his own judgment, whether the condition it is, if it's good and serviceable and meets the needs of the town of Johnson, he should go ahead and buy it.
how do we add that tonight? Make the motion, or how do we wait to the 6th?
If it's part of the original purchase policy,
it's not.
it's not at all.
Purchase procurement.
It's not-
policy
it's
allows
not-
3,000 and
I
under.
understand that, but it doesn't give. They still have latitude to look at something and then decide whether it's a good deal or not, correct? So that's within the purchase policy,
And then I guess,
because we don't even know if it's serviceable or not for sure.
and then it would be 2 trips, one to look at, one to purchase after January 6th.
Right,
And this is on Facebook Marketplace.
I thought that's where it was.
Do we know who owns it and who's had it and what its history is?
This is, I think, yet to be, you know, all of this came about very quickly. And that's, you know, we're looking at a moving target, you know, that meeting with Rosemary is up at 3:30 today, and that brought new light to this. Now we had new light from Jason's conversation that ended at 4:50. I think the goal would be, how do we get the information and allow him the flexibility to make that decision? You know,
Yeah,
and
that's Facebook.
I mean,
there's plenty of good things that are about on Facebook Marketplace all the time.
Yeah, I don't disagree,
It's,
but I don't really want to buy something on the site on the scene.
no, I'm not saying we shouldn't. I'm just saying that he should have a look at it and make a determination whether it's worth it or not. There's a considerable amount of savings here.
Yep.
exponential over time too.
Well, how do we do it? Let's make a motion to bump his ability to purchase this up to $3,500. Is that the asking price right there, Evan?
Yeah.
Let's do that. We have to trust him one way or the other.
Of course,
You know, if he goes, I mean, God only knows, he wheels and deals and equipment enough.
Well, yeah, and he could go through it with the current policy we have in
Where's it
place.
at?
It would be no different if he saw that and looked at it. And then came to the board and said he had a deal for a $22,000 piece of equipment for 3,500. And should we buy it or not, you know?
Just ask where it's located.
I just texted him, yeah.
You did, okay.
I mean, if it's over in Elmira, New York or something, that's another thing, but if it's right here in South Burlington, that's another thing. You could go look at it on your way to work tomorrow.
What, we trying to burn up next year's propane tonight?
Your learning thermostat's not working out.
Yes, no.
Must be he didn't go to school.
How's the board want to handle this? Do they want Jason to get more information for our next meeting? Understanding that there may be a considerable drive?
I want him to, have the freedom to make an offer on this.
You can certainly make a motion.
I would like to, make a motion that Jason investigate this and feel free to make an offer up to $3,500. Trusting his judgment.
Well, they're asking 35. So
That's why I'm
you want to
saying-
try to get it for 3.
There's-
That's
And I'm saying.
Hang on. There's a motion on the floor. Is there
Okay.
a second?
Second.
All right, now is there further discussion?
I guess you could say up to 3,500 and give him the discretion to try to chisel him down. So
Thank you.
you're gonna add that?
No, we're not gonna add that.
Okay.
We trust that he.
For clarity, I do trust Jason's judgment. I will be voting against this based on the quickness and not having much information, not because of trust or anything other of that sort.
And just to be clear, 5,000 that you're talking about is in the 26 proposed capital plan, not the
No.
budget year we're in.
This is in the budget year, we're in, purchase small equipment current year, we budgeted 5, we spent 0.
So it's just current.
That's not, you'd be taking that out of the annual operating, not the capital.
Correct.
Do we have any further discussion on the motion?
You got heartburn? I'm looking at Doug.
Well, if we do this, that reduces his availability to $1,500
Between now and.
between now and the end of the fiscal year.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as everybody's understanding that if it comes out of this year's annual operating budget,
I'm confused. Why it doesn't show as spent, because we spent $6,000 on a compactor, but I don't know where that one lined up. It was not in the capital equipment sheet originally, so I would have probably mistakenly assumed that it would have come out of small equipment purchase.
out somewhere.
But maybe that question's above my pay grade, above my understanding.
That's a question for Rosemary. Where did the compactor come out of?
Yeah, where's that shown in expenditures? Because we could very well be $1,000 overspent already if we budgeted 5,000. But I would still be heavily supportive, I guess, if there was more had time and information. I'm not voting against it because I think it's a bad idea. It's just,
This has no, your motion has no distance or anything added to this, does it?
no, we would probably need to pay overtime. It's because they are pretty busy this winter to go look at it, which is fine. If there's latitude in your motion for that.
It's 2 hours away, 2 hours and 17 minutes away.
Oh, that's not that bad.
It's in Malone, New York.
It's in Malone.
Malone.
I don't
You
know.
going to Malone out here right now?
No plans.
And now how far is that from Elmira?
A long.
And I wouldn't be able to tell the difference between whether it was a good deal or a bad deal.
You gotta start at Well, that's 2.5 hours each way.
Yeah, at least.
You're gonna spend the whole day.
Yeah, it is. It's an all day affair. You're gonna get lunch,
No.
you're gonna get coffee twice.
Maybe with the current, well,
He
the
doesn't need to take anybody with him.
work hours start at 2 o'clock, right? 2 a.m. is their start hours.
3:30,
Was it
3?
3?
Yeah, I think Mark starts salting earlier, but I think Jason's, the rest of the guys come in.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, 3:30 makes sense.
Why would this have to be overtime?
If the regular working hours are 3:30 to noon, I'm not sure. I just saying if there's latitude for it, isn't it?
I mean, there. Of course, there's latitude for it. I would prefer. For Jason to get up on a day that it's not snowing and drive to Malone,
No overtime.
no overtime.
Yeah.
That would be
That's an,
my preferred, but. You know,
Have we
I would
discussed,
prefer less overtime.
have we discussed this enough?
so this overtime business is just gonna be an add-on, not part of any motions or anything.
Fine.
I think it's just discussed.
I'm texting him, can you
It's
look
just-
at it without overtime?
It's discussed with general consensus. There's no,
I mean, he's got a limit on overtime. They always reach the limit.
It's up to his discretion to choose how he wants.
Yeah.
it.
that was the contract.
Are we still
First
under
one.
discussion of the motion?
Yeah.
I'm ready to call it unless somebody
Well, he
else.
goes by himself. He doesn't need to take 2 or 3 guys with him.
I have one thing I'd just like to say, I'm not opposed to buying it. I think it might be a really good deal. I guess I'm with you, Evan. I'm a little concerned about I don't think we should willy-nilly go over our procurement policy thresholds. So that bothers me a little bit. I think there's a reason that we have a $3,000, which we increased from 1,500 to 3,000 already once this year. So I'm kind of fundamentally opposed to just making that arbitrary decision to exceed the purchasing.
But if
policy.
we vote, Duncan, doesn't that say we're, for this particular item, we're allowing him to go above?
That's,
I mean,
yeah. it
It'll
does.
stay- it'll
It does.
stay-
I'm-
it'll
I'm
stay
just
at
saying that I'm comfortable
$3,000.
with that.
after this, it'll go back to $3,000.
That's fine. I'm just saying that I'm uncomfortable with making that exception.
I bet you $100, when somebody starts out at 3,500, they're gonna take 3,000 or less.
They started at
The thing that I don't
5,200 and then dropped
understand
it.
is,
How much?
52. And then
you
dropped
think
to
we should put
35.
it out to bid?
I'm not lowering. it.
No.
Or you
no,
think one of us should
I
go,
would
or?
really like to have, to me, it's kind of sudden and I.
No, I understand
I
that.
totally am in favor of having Jason go look at it and come back to the board and say, you guys really ought to buy this.
So
And a new one is X. Here's your other bid for comparison. Done.
And by the time all that happens, it's gone.
It could be gone.
Town,
Okay.
yeah,
Could be, and.
It
you
could
know,
be gone
he does-
already.
Jason doesn't have independent authority to kind of check anyway. He'd have to come back here and get authorization from Rosemary and, you know, have Rosemary got a check or whatever.
I mean,
think it's
Jason
overtime,
did call Evan about, or text Evan about this on Friday. He did talk to me on Friday about it. But I think the new information is that it reduces before it was like, geez, we gotta. Your concern is very valid. I think I had the same response that you did. It was like, well, let's slow this down. Like, how do you know it's a good deal? It's 2 hours away. Like, how are we gonna work this out? The new information is that it saves us $11,000 next year. That never came to light until right now.
If we decide to buy a boom mower, which we haven't actually decided yet.
That's my point. Yeah, I mean, on Friday, everyone was in agreement, so we gotta slow down and think this all out. It's only new information as of like 4:50 tonight.
Why don't I just give him the $3,000 and he can go over and buy it
Pay you back.
and then pay me back? Then we'll just move on.
There is a reimbursement. policy.
Really? Good grief. I mean it too. I'll give him the money cash in the morning and go buy the dumb thing. And then I'll get reimbursed from the town.
Well,
that would get us out of the sticky wicket. You'll have to vote for or against it here.
And If we don't want it, we'll split the profit on it, Jason and I. Sell it to somebody else for $6,000. Good grief. We're trying to save money here. We just need to jump on this.
And he might get over there and it's junk.
This piece of junk, right? We
He
just-
might, and we have not, as a board, decided that we even want to. I mean, when you talked about it last week, or when, at some point in time, we were discussing the possibility of contracting out roadside.
Yeah,
So, you know, we haven't had that, we haven't finalized, we haven't decided we want to buy a boom mower yet.
we have a problem, right? The problem's well known. It's been since we worked on the cap of the landfill, is that our ditch bank mower is no longer serviceable and we have to do something. So it's not a new surprise that we have to just buy a new roadside mower. In the past, we always put a new articulating mower is 25,000. And so we weren't, it was almost too big to even comprehend. And now with our new, and they even kind of stopped using the ditch bank because they can only use it without our new ditches. Our new ditches are wider, they're deeper, the ditch bank can't reach the other side. So we have to contract out, pay $10,000 or $10,700 this year to pay somebody to drive around and mow. Where if we buy the mower, we're just paying our labor. We've already budgeted this labor, there's no overtime, there's nothing special. And they're doing the same thing they were doing with the ditch bank. They're just doing all the roads now. We tried to contract, we looked into that, but the only person I could find was this guy Walter Groski out of Irisburg, or Norton, sorry. And has 14 towns and he's reducing the number of towns. He's older and slowing down. So there's just nobody doing it right now, which puts it, so we've already like kind of explored all these options. And this just kind of fell in, this is like a new aspect of that option, and it is rushed. I think that's very clear. And like, how do you make that, how do you allow somebody to pursue an idea without putting the town at risk, but allowing him to seize the opportunity, you know? And that's like the theory, the conceptual idea is, you know, you don't want to be all willy-nilly, and the reservation is very well received. Like, I think everybody would have had the same reservation. But now it actually makes sense with our budget, which then do we keep going on the same plan, or do we make the plan match our new needs, you know? And I think all of this stuff is kind of happening all at once because we have to do it right now because it's budget season.
So
I think there'll be 3 people in support anyways. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And the ayes have it. So there's latitude. Can you let Jason know? All right, we got
Does the
off
board want me to give him $3,000?
the towns. You guys motioned
Just
it
made a
too expensive.
motion to-
I know, but I mean, I can
$3,500.
still do that if you want.
I think it complicates things.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, were there any other highlights? I do have one question, but I just wanted to make sure we weren't cutting anything off.
are you texting Jason right now?
Yeah.
I'm gonna get up at 2 o'clock and drive to Malone.
Pretty town.
Meet the guy at 5 o'clock.
You've been there?
No,
Pretty depressing.
is it?
Yeah, it's pretty grim.
Were there any other highlights
Oh,
to go over?
he's gonna buy that right on the spot.
If it allows him latitude, if he doesn't think it's a good fit or a piece of junk, he's not forced to buy it by the motion.
Well, it'd be nice. I don't wanna muddy the waters here, I really don't. But if it's a good deal, he should buy it on the spot and save a trip.
And I think the way to do that can probably be done just by working with Rosemary in the office, where you've already authorized the expense of $3,500. She could write a check to the person. And Jason could take it with him and just. It'll be up to him to void it and shred it and bring it back to Rosemary to shred, or it's up to him to give it away. But I think that's how I would approach it.
Well, he doesn't need a $3,500 check. He needs something in between. He
It's
needs
blank check.
he needs a blank check, is right.
That's terrifying.
All right, all right, have you beaten this horse?
Does he have the same?
As long as he's got the latitude to buy it on the spot.
He's coming.
Give him a blank check or whatever, or 2 checks, one for 35, one for 3, or whatever. But he's gonna be able to dicker it down, I'm sure.
I believe Charlie has a question.
Now I gotta come this day and age, where
That's
we'd be done,
technology.
yeah.
A lot of times there's a $15 fee.
All right, Mike, we've been on this one subject for 30 minutes. I think there's latitude and the board has made a
Okay.
motion. Were there any other
I think
items you wanted to point out?
I just really want to emphasize that just by cleaning up the accounting, we're down to 3.165. It's Rosemary and I did not have time to comb it over and make sure everything's copacetic, but the preliminary is that. Which if our cost of living allocation is right now 2.5 for the first 6 months and 3.5 for the second 6 months. We're in a pretty good spot. I mean, it would be nice to get it, have a target and get it there. I think that's wise, but I think tonight, if we could even start line by line and start pointing out some issues. And maybe even check off some areas and say, okay, we're done, we're never going back. And then set that target. I think setting that target allows direction to say, okay, we need to find 20,000, 10,000, what that doesn't what that is, but then I can start to work, then I can start getting in there.
I'm cool with starting line by line. Can I ask one question about the highlighted items?
Yeah.
Just for my understanding. So right now the paving target 200,000, understanding it's a little floating. Where are we showing? So we're showing the 78,000 coming in. Where are we showing it going out on the line item, just so I can understand?
Down on 58,
58,
50-8-40, it's like the very bottom of the second to last page,
50-8.
-40-56.
But we're 40-56.00 is maintenance. And 56, 40-56-01 is highway capital. I totally get that. But if we're planning on spending 200,000 and we're bringing 78 in, we need to show it as an expense. Right now, we're showing 78,000 coming in as revenue without an expense. So
I am with you 100%.
can you change that to on your sheet to 200,000? Or just add 78 to the 110 for now, so we can get a little bit.
Yes.
We're talking
and
about percent increases, but that's like 4% difference.
It is,
give or take.
it is. And so this is where Rosemary and I finished that we need to tie up is that the example that came up was how we do the capital. And again, we were like rushed out of the room.
Capital equipment.
How we do office capital equipment is we budget 30,000. If you buy a $12,000 server, you only transfer X number of dollars into the reserve fund, right? But it still comes out of that 30,000. And so what I want to show, I'm not comfortable with the way this is set up, which is why it's still bright orange. Is that we need to show the money going into the reserve, and we need to show money coming out of the reserve, and then money. We need to also show that money revenue. So you're right.
To me, yeah,
I just don't know how to do
To
that.
me,
I need
it's
to sit down with her.
almost a perfect mirror image of the highway capital equipment reserve. As we bring money in.
Yeah.
We inject money, we spend money. There's 3 things. Right now, we're only showing money coming in and injecting. We're not showing spend. So that's where I might be missing something. I think we're around 7% increase, not 3 right now.
I agree with you 1,000%. It's still neon orange for a reason. Rosemary and I, again, we finished early. She needs to make sure that the accounts are lined up, on the reserve side, but then also on this side, so that we're showing the true cost.
Okay.
Do you think that this is not gonna play out the way?
In our first
I mean-
conversation, she said it was the same as how we did the office stuff, but
I
you know
mean-
what? It's orange because we have to sit down and make sure both sides are right.
Reserves. in essence, it's money in, money out. We could take that 98,000, trim it by 78,000 and we'd have a accurate picture where we're at. So we'd be showing coming in, showing spending.
Yeah, so it's almost like we're showing it's, I think the difference in this particular year is that we're showing it's spent in the FY 25 estimated final, but we're not getting any work for it. So we're putting it in.
We are?
I think I must be totally missing something. Because on the sheet that you handed out. Rosemary has in cash on hand, which is basically think of it as your check.
Absolutely.
She's got paving reserves. 116,367.68. That money, since we created a pavement reserve fund last year, that money should not be in the checkbook. It should be in the pavement reserve fund. Should it not?
Yes, so. We don't have an expense, so right now, if you look at 50-8-40-56. 110,000 and 112. That money is being expended into that fund. But it's not shown in that fund yet. It won't show until July 1st. So that 116 is going to turn into 238. And that's why I need to make sure Rosemary, I think we're missing an account, to Evan's point, is like, that's why that's neon orange, is because we don't have the contribution to the reserve, but we have the revenue from the reserve.
So what we need is, rather than a line for obligated funds, don't we need a line that says paving
Yes.
reserve fund?
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely. And you can see in that note, which drives me nuts. I agree with you. It drives me nuts because there's three things going into that obligated fund because we don't have a good mechanism right now. And so for me, I have to put a little side note that says, oh yeah, that's paving, that's audit reserve, and that's, so that's three different reserve funds are shown coming in as one revenue, which isn't transparent. I don't like that at all.
So here's my thought on that. At the end of the day, I think I put this in my email to you earlier in the day. It's our budget. It's just like this budget. Rosemary's chart of accounts ultimately needs to mirror what our budget says.
Right.
So if we put in a line item in the spreadsheet that says paving reserve, then you and Rosemary need to meet after the budget at some point in time.
Yeah.
And you say, Rosemary,
Yeah,
the chart of accounts needs to reflect the budget.
you're absolutely spot on and you're getting ahead of me. And that's why that obligated funds is orange, is because I'm saying, hey, we have a problem. It's not transparent. And you're giving me the direction to say, make the revenue line to match the money coming in. That's what I'm hearing, is that I think we're both.
Yeah, no, my comment to the full board is we need a line item specifically, revenue from paving reserve fund.
I would like to restructure, now that we have that reserve fund, if you guys are okay with this, where the line is of paving and 110 and 12, that should be what Eben wants to show the total cost of the paving project. And then we have a different expenditure that's contribution to the reserve.
Well, how did we set up the reserve fund?
It has to be funded from those two lines. We can't change those lines.
Right.
That's why I said I had my fingers up for two. I believe we need two line items. Exactly like you're saying, just a new one that says paving capital projects expended this year, whatever. And then we need a paving reserve coming in.
Yeah.
Because that, like I said, that will drastically change percentages that we're talking about.
I think we're okay this year. I know it's not shown as money out, but and here's why, is because in fiscal year 25, on that second to last page, there's 12,000 and 110,000. That's orange.
Yeah,
On
they're
July 1st, that's
going into the reserve.
correct.
Yep.
And so next year, so that way that's already going in. So next year going in, we have another 122 and coming out of the reserve 78. So I think it still keeps that next year's budget at 3.15%. I don't think it increases it.
I disagree with you.
Okay, I mean, all we can do is correct the accounting.
How does the board feel? Do you understand what we're talking about? I might not be.
Vaguely.
Creating new
So,
line items.
so we're talking about creating new line items, but what I'm saying is we're planning on $78,000 coming in because we're gonna spend 200 grand. We're not showing that we're spending 200 grand. If you actually showed that, we're only showing it as revenue. If we show the actual expense,
How do we
it will not be there.
account for that extra 122 from this year?
I mean, one thing you could do is not show it as revenue
And where would you
and
put it?
just assume it as expense in last year.
Let's leave it orange. And I would, if it's okay, we can set it up just as we discussed, which I think makes sense, right? Total expense for the project. Those two accounts, I guess we have to leave them because that's the way the reserve was set up.
Yep.
And then we have the revenue in.
Mirror image to capital equipment, right? Some years we inject less into the reserve fund than we spend, but we show it coming in.
I mean,
It's just like that.
if we can just get Rosemary to do that, then we'll be on the same page. That'll be sharp.
Shouldn't that have been done right along?
Well, I repeat, this is our budget.
That's what I would think.
If we need a line item in the budget, we need to put it in the budget. And Rosemary's chart of accounts needs to reflect what we put in the budget.
Are we, is Rosemary not understanding our wishes?
No, I think my guess is that there is now cash on hand
Cooling down.
Open
is managed in a way that
Can't do that.
then I think we're starting to do it. We're now starting to create reserve funds versus like unexpended money kind of held aside for future use.
No, and I like the clarity of reserve funds.
Correct. It has a legal protection.
And part of the problem we have right now, Mark, is
It's still being held in the
that
checkbook.
money is still being held in the checkbook. It
General
really
fund.
should be, because we created, the voters approved
Right,
creation of a reserve fund last year for paving.
that's why I'm wondering. Is it, you're saying it's our budget, I'm thinking that Tom should be talking to Rosemary to move this around, maybe. Evan should be telling Rosemary, this is our budget, we need this out of cash.
I
And put
mean,
into reserves.
I think this budget has been carried over from whenever Emmerich first came, probably 2000, 1999. And it's just been added to, and you can kind of see that accounts are added and it could be rearranged. And I think at some point, we're getting really close to a time when we just need to stop, rip it down and build it back up. And when you do that, it will never be a conversation again, and it'll be a lot easier.
But you saw, did you hear my point is, I mean, where's the communication falling apart? The
Between,
voters approved reserve funds. It's still sitting in cash.
I suppose the direction should be from the board to Rosemary immediately following town meeting to create it and show it.
You agree there, but
And that can be through the town administrator or through the board itself. That's a move, but
Yeah, because at the end of the day, we do want the budget. Rosemary will want this too. She's gonna want, once we have an approved budget, she's gonna wanna be able to cut and paste the budget right into her chart of accounts. That's the simplest, cleanest, easiest way to do it. So if our budget doesn't line up with her chart of accounts, that's a headache for her too.
and that's where you end up with that page one, that obligated funds, why you have three accounts going into one is because it doesn't line up. And that's exactly what Duncan's saying is those three, those should all,
New lines.
correct, each one should have its own
Yeah.
to match the reserve.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
And
if you-
again, for us, it's a lot cleaner because you can, as Evan points out, if you have money coming in from the reserve, you're gonna see an equivalent of money going out under an expense.
That's exactly what we do in capital highway.
Yes,
We just inject everything that we budget
so the net
Into the
impact
fund?
on the budget is zero.
and we show money coming in and going out.
I mean, the net
So-
impact on the tax rate is zero.
that's right.
The budget. May.
It just rises with the cost of, with the need, right?
is this the problem you created 15 years ago?
Well, when
I'm
when
just
Tom
stunned that
said,
we're
Tom
just,
said 1999.
we're just,
Remember?
when Tom said that
Reinventing
we're gonna
the
do this over and we'll never have a problem again, my immediate response was, we already did it once, and now it's coming back.
Yeah,
So I can tell you, we spent months and months and months working with NEMR, developing a chart of accounts.
yeah,
What I used to do at the end of the year, when the budget was done, was sit down with Rosemary, line up the items in the chart of accounts so that they were the same. So even to the extent of having the right, if we change the name on the
Right,
chart of
yeah.
accounts number, that gets reflected
absolutely.
in, in her chart of accounts. So when we see the budget status report, it lines up perfectly
And
with. our
that would
budget
be
schedule.
really
If we-
lovely.
If we redo the reserve, our accounts are 2 digits short to work with Nemrick's software. Another comment. But we can create what's called, in our case, would be 53, which is our fund account. So every one of these would have a number on here, and we would have a representative revenue and expense to match to go in and out of that reserve fund. And what's cool about that is you just print a budget status report, and you can actually show really clean, like your whole line of accounts and how much is in them and how much is going in and out, and how much has gone in and out. And it's, and so you're taking what takes me half an hour to an hour just to input into a spreadsheet, you're just hitting right click and you're done in about 3 seconds. Because you're doing the work throughout the week, every bill, every process. It's just, I think we're getting close to that. I don't think it's fair to do that to Rosemary in her last year. Maybe that's like the new person's job.
So are you saying that every reserve fund would have a common number? I'm not sure which be the third number in.
Yeah, so like so I did this for, right? I had Rosemary's job. And so I call them 41s, and I can give you my old budget so you can clean it. You can see it. I have a PDF. It's like you would show, so here we have 5610, right? So I had 40s and 41s. So it'd be, 11,640 and 11,641. And what those were 40s were into a fund and 41s were out of a fund. And it was a way that you could show that money, budget that money in and out. And then you balance it with would be a 5740 and a 5741, and 41s would balance. And so it didn't change your tax rate, but it was transparent to the function of how money moved, because a budget isn't accounts, right? It's really just like, this tells you really have just like one account with a big number, and the budget just tells you where how the money moved. Did it move in or did it move out, and how much, and why did you do it?
But if you do that, how do you segregate the individual reserve funds?
So you go in and out, instead of doing like, here we have like 50-0 is our main checking. We would have, 50-3, or we have, Rosemary has a 53 fund for the FEMA stuff. So you would create a new fund for each one. So in this case, because it's connected to our general fund, you do a 50-3- whatever, and that's your new fund. And that would show up. So you print your budget status report, and right beside it, you have your balance sheet. And on your balance sheet, you're going to have a list of liabilities, your taxes, or all the stuff. And then just below that, you're going to have your funds. And every fund on this sheet is going to show up and accounted for in Nemrick. And it's really clean. It's really fast to see. And it also shows you where you are at the end year. You have a fund balance for the total year. So you have your total assets minus your total liabilities, and you can show the actual available cash at any given time, even though you have $2 million in the bank.
I think I understand what you're
And I'm
saying.
thinking he's saying yes to your question, but I'm not convinced.
But I'm not convinced either, because I think what we need to be able to show in a report is we had X amount in the payment reserve fund,
Correct.
X amount in the,
Yeah, totally.
um,
I'll email you my old budget status report and my old balance sheet, and then it'll be really clean. I mean, you'll take it. If you can read this, I thought you can read that. And it's just,
I'm good with, if we can simplify it, I'm good. I just need to know that we need to be able to show how much is going into each and every reserve fund. We need to be very clear
Well, I think that's what they're trying to accomplish, isn't it?
What's that?
I think that's what we're trying to accomplish. To have a clean,
Yeah, and
So-
if.
so
what
even a
Tom is-
caveman could read it.
If
right?
what Tom is suggesting does that, I'm all in favor. I guess I can't visualize it. I need to see it.
And the only way to do it is really to have, you probably have to pay Nemrick to create a new set of software so that you build it without interrupting your day-to-day and then merge in. Because I think it takes a long time to build a new chart of accounts. So you can't just like do it overnight. You have to, it would take some time.
And you're thinking that Rosemary's replacement should be doing this.
Either A, have that be the 2 months before she leaves, so she's working with somebody to explain the new, or 2 months after, within, so they're doing it side by side. Rosemary should be part of the process, because, she speaks Latin, and you have a new person coming in speaking English, and you really need a translator for both of them.
But these software changes would straighten the whole mess out, wouldn't they?
And it's the software we already have, it's just taking the time to just reconfigure it, and I think.
Well, that's what I'm driving at.
Yeah, and if two people from the board sat down with Rosemary and I, you could just identify the interests, like, okay, we want it broken out by this, or we want it broken out by that. And so you might pull from different areas of the budget to kind of capture the existing accounts, but you've already identified the holes, so you add those in. And then you also identify the fluff, the stuff you want to get rid of because it's unnecessary to track anymore. And so it's part of A, you're shedding off the unnecessary, and B, you're adding the stuff that you're not really getting, but you want, and I think it takes time, but it's a process that really makes it clean and easy in the future.
Well,
So
email that over to Duncan,
Oh, to all you guys.
or email it to all of us.
So
Yeah,
the potential with doing these changes would make the whole budget process simpler.
So much faster.
I believe it. Right.
I think we're talking about processes and not the budget.
Yeah, so
True, but we're still trying
what,
to work into something that will help us in the long run.
what do we
Yeah.
need to
So
do?
the immediate purposes, with this year's budget,
Yes, I understand.
I think we need, and I think you're agreeing that we need a revenue line item that's paving reserve.
Yes.
And to Evan's point, we also, because of the way the article was worded, it specifically says to be funded by any one or a combination of a dedicated budget line item. So we could add a dedicated budget line item for paving reserve. Year-end balances from paving budget line items or reservation of the year-end budget surplus. So the latter is, if we end up with $300,000, we could say, well, let's put 30,000 in the paving.
We certainly could.
So it was no more specific than general fund reserve, but surplus. That what you just read,
The last piece was general surplus.
general surplus, okay.
The middle
No,
piece
I-
was 2 line items.
I understood
And
that,
the third piece was dedicated.
If we add a different line item.
okay, so that's what I was getting at.
Yeah, so my suggestion would be to add a line item
Yeah,
dedicated paving
Contribution,
reserve.
yeah, contribution.
And
then-
shift that 122 up and then leave paving capital, but increase it to 200.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
That's almost exactly what I was saying, and it's gonna push up that percentage.
But then you take that 78 and you increase it by the 122 that because we're adding an additional 122 that we're saying we're paving, but really what we're doing is adding into the fund.
Right,
So that's what I would do. It's like you show the total expense and you show the total revenue, and it's just clean. Right now, we don't have a good mechanism of that because we don't have a good.
well,
Right.
getting back to Evan's point. Now I'm a little worried, is this gonna show up as?
I don't think
a
so.
New
it will raise the percentage increase in
That's-
taxes.
It
Yeah,
will,
But it
Yeah.
will.
There'll be money that ends up still in the reserve fund. Like
So-
that,
So this,
if we budget 200,000 and you add 122 to 116.
We're
There's
still,
no money
we're
left
still in
over.
surplus.
Yeah, there'll
And
still
so
be
I
a
think-
surplus.
And by, yes, you're increasing, so that 78,000, yes, you're increasing the revenue by 78,000.
Yep, for sure.
And you're also gonna increase the expenditure by 78,000.
That's exactly what I was saying. Yeah, when you increase the expense,
I understand.
the
So it's not-
percent increase to taxes will go up.
I disagree.
Do it right on your
This-
sheet right now.
Yeah, this is,
Just show your capital equipment expense at 200,000.
I'm gonna go get a drink of water. You guys get to the bottom of this, right?
So it's gonna be shown in two ways, right? So one, this, I hate this. I'm gonna show, I'll go this. Okay, you know what?
No, I mean, we're showing the 78 coming in, right? We're planning on spending 200,000.
I think we're gonna ignore the 78 right now. So
We
let's
can't-
start over,
if-
start over. Let me have my process, please.
Okay.
So we're gonna increase this total expenditure to 200,000, right?
Yep.
And we now know
You
that
gotta add
there's,
3 more zeros.
and we now know. All right. And so we now know that there's going to be 116 plus 122 is 238,000 in reserves. At the start of fiscal year 26.
Yeah, I'm not worried about the reserve fund.
And then so we go up here and we change this. From 78. We're gonna add 122,000 to this. Because that's how we're funding it. Out of that reserve fund.
Well, then you can't show the expense to the reserve fund.
And I think, you know, how you do that is you do. And I think to go back to my, because I don't wanna mess up that 98, because it's a combination of.
Yeah, but-
But I think, so this is my point, is like, if we just take a break. And on January 6th, we'll have the right accounts that you just told me to tell Rosemary to put in. We'll put those in and we'll show the true money in. From the reserve fund, we'll show the true expense. And then we'll show any leftover for the contribution to capital fund, and it'll be a lot cleaner.
So the 122,
It's already in the line
The
down.
122 that I just added is fiscal year 25's unexpended paving lines.
right, so if you show that as. Estimated year end as that's the full 122. So that's the 110 plus the 12, right?
Correct, yes. So that, and that's in the estimated year end. That's what I was trying to say, because we didn't have that account. I didn't know how to show what to do with that 120. That was where I was stuck, because I didn't have the right tool. So instead, I just reduced it by 122 on both ends and made it 78. That because I had that tool.
Now,
So it's this right here, those
Yeah.
two.
can I walk you through my process just
Yeah.
so that I'm in understanding? So we're gonna spend 200,000 on paving.
Yeah.
We're agreed with that, even though we know it's a little fluctuating, right? How much are we putting in the reserve fund? 122,000, right?
But there's already 116 in there, right?
It doesn't matter how much is in there.
You want to know
I agree with you.
how much to add at the end of fiscal year?
How much are we injecting into it in 2026?
It would be,
Let's say 122. So let's show that expense under paving.
so that
Paving.
increases the budget. That.
That's exactly what I was trying to say.
So I guess the question to the board is, do you want to, we have a brand new fund that we never funded before, and so now we're funding it with unexpended lines from paving. And so the question is, do you want to keep that contribution at 122,000? Or do you want to reduce it this year to pave at no increase to taxes? That's the fundamental question. And
So,
that-
so what you're saying is you were proposing not injecting money in that fund, and that's why we're at 3%.
it's 122 minus 78 would still get injected in.
So we're talking,
So 44,000 would still get in, leaving the fund at 160,000 at the end of next year.
I'm not worried about the balance to the fund. I believe that we won't be shy. I'm worried about the balance to the fund in the future, which, you know, when we get a better plan for the future, that's great. I personally don't think that we can not contribute to it at the same rate that we're at, and that's a board decision, not a me decision. I'm just trying to walk you through my process on how to show it and why I think that it.
We agree on how to show it right, but I think where we're having trouble communicating is that there's not the tools to show it. And I think if we can just get those accounts on the spreadsheet, it'll be we're talking about the same dollars and cents. I think it's gonna go cleaner. And then from there, you guys will say, well, that only contributes this much, or only this much. And then you can start having those discussions back and forth without everyone else being confused.
Okay. If you can make this so I'm not confused.
That's.
I mean, really, there's 3 lines, right? And we could show it right now.
Then let's do it.
I know it's fiddling these numbers a little bit, but we're planning on spending 200,000 on paving. What does the board want to budget to put into the fund? Do we want to stay at 122 and budget later?
I won't put anything in the fund. I want to budget for pay,
How much do you want to budget for paving?
the same that we did.
You want to budget 122, and you're showing the 122 coming in above, so under paving maintenance, put that instead of at 12,000, 122,000. So in essence, we're rejecting 122,000 into a fund, paving, whatever. We're pulling 200 out. And we're accounting for 200 out above, right?
Do we need that much money in there?
So
Paving is very expensive and we're behind on it.
Yes, well, it's,
So the question,
That's a
we
crux.
need.
So we're
more
showing
bids.
200 coming from the reserve fund. And we're showing paying 200 for a project, right? I understand these are fudged and not lined up with accounts. 200
Yes.
coming from reserve, 200 going to a project.
and that,
How much are we injecting into the fund? We just talked about 122,000,
and that increases taxes by 78,000 from what was proposed.
which is what I was asking about from the start.
But I think we were miscommunicating on the amount to add to the fund. I was adding 44,000 to the fund, but didn't have the tools to show you. You wanted to add 122,000 to the fund. So that's why I think if we show those 3 accounts, it'll be very clean.
Certainly.
But getting to the crux of what Evan is talking about. That 78,000 is going in and going out, and we're not. We're not using it to reduce taxes.
We were using it to reduce taxes in what was presented.
Right, and that's.
Well, I disagree. I wouldn't call it using it to reduce taxes. I was saying, you're budgeting $122,000 a year for paving. And whether you use that to pave or contribute to a fund, you take that 122 and you put it towards paving. And then how much are you pulling out? You know, you can, and so a lot of times towns, they'll budget a 5-year project at $1 million. They put $200,000 in and they get to the 5th year, they're at 0. So they're still only budgeting 200,000. But at the end of it, it goes to 0. And it's really hard to show that with the accounts we have right now. I mean, and that's really why they're orange and why we're even having this discussion is I'm asking permission to clean it up.
And which is perfectly fine. I just want to know, to Evan's point,
We can,
is that $78,000 that we're talking about back in play and now something that we have to adjust up your percent number by?
it is,
It already
it
did.
does.
Okay,
So that can
so
be,
it's not at 3%.
Let me throw something
Yeah,
out
it
here.
is. We've got 6.7.
Really confused.
Right,
Um,
thank you. Ben.
I'm thinking about this, I'm trying to think about this from budget year to budget year. The report that we have from Rosemary is cash on hand at the end of fiscal year 2023. And we had 116,367 in there in the check, which really, in my opinion, should be in the paving reserve fund. Shouldn't be in a check.
I think we all agree on that, right? It should
Yep.
be in favor and reserve fund.
Yes,
Okay.
it should.
So
The
going
voters want it.
forward, the 122 is in the current year that we're in.
Mhm.
So we shouldn't put that into the paving reserve fund because it hasn't happened yet. We don't, it's not part of the 2024
Right.
cash on hand figure. Right?
I agree. Where's the confusion? Is it because I had to add it back on the bottom?
My take on it would be, you've got it in there right now as being spent.
Cause I didn't have another mechanism, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's correct. The question is, what happens if we. There's one or two things that could happen. We could either get the paving done before the fiscal year ends. Whereby it wouldn't be a question of putting it into the reserve fund, it'd be a question of paying a bill.
Which is not likely to happen.
Well, it could,
The
it
last,
could happen.
the last time we did paving, we spanned fiscal years, right?
Yes, and what we did was we got the paving company to agree to
Oh,
bill us over, to
Yeah.
include that amount in the bill.
And that's what you had to do when you don't have reserve funds.
Yes, so for this year that we're sort of in between. To me, that would be a cleaner way to handle, would be to try and get it done before the end of the fiscal year, if at all possible, and if not, try and get the paving company to agree to accept those. That is part of the payment, and then going forward, the reserve fund is clean. It's whatever we didn't spend goes in there, so if there's a balance between the 122 and the 116 and what we want to pay. It could go in there isn't gonna be. But then if they're at the end of 2024, if there's a balance between 122, which is in the FY25 budget, and 116, which was
Cash on hand,
on hand, and the 26 proposed of
22 right
110
now.
plus 12. Then if there's a balance, whatever that balance is, then goes into the reserve fund. At the end of the fiscal year.
Can we put the 3 new accounts in for next year's budget?
We could, but
I think we'd have to have a
we
hybrid
should.
of both, right?
I think we should have the 116 show in the reserve
Reserve
fund
fund.
because we created the fund last year. That was part of last year's
Oh,
articles and vote.
I think that's brilliant. And I think we put 116 in the revenue line. We were pulling that out, right? And we're gonna show,
Yes.
but then show 200 and whatever for the total cost.
Yes, so your line item.
We're talking about the same
for
numbers.
Paving 26.
he's very quiet. and I
Needs to
don't
be
know
the
whether
full
he's
200,
with us.
whatever it is.
We need Jason, or probably the split between the two, right? Because it's half and half or whatever, we'll figure it out.
Question,
Yeah, you're right.
More of an observation.
what's your observation?
I think you're using the wrong tool to try to do what you're talking about. You're gonna do, and these are not the real numbers, you're gonna do a paving project that costs $200,000. Okay, but that doesn't belong in the budget. What belongs in the budget is you're gonna take 78,000 of that 200,000. Is going to be budgeted from the current year. And will be raised from taxes. And the additional 122,000 comes out of reserve fund. Is that what we're talking about?
Not quite, but at the end of the day. We are literally talking the same numbers.
Yeah.
I agree with your process. The only reason I had to show it that way is because. We're showing it, the only reason I asked for it to be shown. In the accounts, I believe the full board is in agreement on. We were only showing revenue coming in and we weren't showing the actual expense. Which. Skews the sheet.
Needs to be there.
That's all I needed to show. We were showing $78,000 coming in, but we weren't showing spending it anywhere. And. Tom did say outright, he just needs the place to show it. We're disagreeing. I believe it will change tax rate, but. You acknowledged like there just needs to be an account and a mechanism.
That's right. And there's a difference of 44,000, or 78 and 44, where I think. If we show it the right way, we have all the money to do the job we want to do. It's just how much gets contributed. And how much the job costs is gonna change anything. But like, we're still gonna do the job, and I still think we can keep it at the 3.16%, because we have the money in reserves to do it. And we're saying that we're spending money this year into reserves to do it. It's just a matter of showing it in a manner that's accurate.
I totally agree with you. We could do it, with no impact to taxes. The only way that we can do that is by reducing this number. Which is cash on hand, and we've all agreed it needs to be in reserve fund.
It needs to come out.
Yeah, but the only way that we pull 78,000 out and spend it is by reducing this 116. This is a larger conversation for the board. How low do we want the reserve to dip? Because we're just dwindling it down. We are keeping the tax rate down, but it's ripping money out of reserves to offset your tax rate.
The directive that I'm hearing is put the accounts in there and have Rosemary take it out of cash on hand and put it into a reserve fund.
I think we have to. We created, it was the voters created a reserve fund.
We didn't.
Okay, so. I think your interpretation is right, Tom.
And
You're
then-
writing this down and you're gonna do it.
And I think the other directive is that I tell Jason to get pricing, like measure up Wilson Road and get a price. Call Pike and get an estimate.
And would it also be that we would prefer to have it done before July 1?
I
Or
think-
as close to as possible so that.
We could span fiscal years, yeah.
The billing could.
Yeah.
stay in
Okay,
fiscal year.
yeah.
And we
But
might even do it in
if-
May and they'll agree to
Nobody's
accept.
gonna.
If we're spanning fiscal years, totally fine. We don't really need to show any money coming out of the reserve fund.
But I think let's just get a price. Let's set up the accounts and create the reserve fund. And then I think the next, in January, we'll have a great conversation. 'Cause we'll have everything,
Down to the river.
all the tools.
Okay. Anybody want to start line by line or just go over a couple items that they have? It's 6:30. We are getting up against a time crunch pretty quick.
Is there anything that we've increased by our 2.5% that doesn't need an increase?
Define doesn't need.
Right,
Yeah, right.
yeah, you make that
They-
call, you're in the position of power.
They want, but don't need?
I mean, going down through everything quick. Do you still have anything at 2.5, Tom?
I have not had a chance to screen it that much. I was
I-
going group by group.
Quickly, I don't see them.
My immediate observation was it mostly was a loss of revenue that we were looking at.
And we're gonna lose some more, is another big conversation for the board.
Yeah.
I mean, expenses are up for sure, right?
Yeah.
Revenue is down 3.1%. Overall expenses are up 3.6%.
And Tom, you've already got some flag, but the revenue from pilot payment. We really need to know what that number is gonna be. I strongly suspect it's gonna be.
You stole the wind from underneath me.
So that's orange.
Yeah.
We initially I had it at 420. And then after meeting with Rosemary, she said the CLA comes out and because I lowballed it thinking it was the right thing to do. She said the CLA comes out in January and its sales hasn't changed. You know, it's not like when we had COVID and the years following COVID, things were spiking. So the CLA was plummeting. But sales are actually stable. And so the CLA should stay about what it is from last year. I mean, do you think prices have gone up or down? You know, and we won't know that till January.
Do you know when in January?
Don't.
Can you ask Rosemary to find out when and maybe email the board, the CLA when it comes
Does
out?
Justin concur with that opinion, that the CLA is gonna stay the same?
I was actually writing my note to email Justin to have him reach out to PBR to see timeline and the CLA coming out. Because I think that's probably the right.
Have you heard anything more from Westman?
I haven't heard a thing from either Dan or Rick.
You want me to nudge them?
Yeah, there's one.
Right now,
Well, I
right
nudged
now
them
it's a
to start
formula.
with, Hold you in, I'll nudge you do some more.
There is, I guess there's been some publicity about this statewide.
Oh, yeah, because we're not the only town
That's right. And
plumbing in CLA and pilot.
legislation doesn't open session until the first. So like, even if they can't. I think Westman can't give us an answer really until, you know, he meets. I think that's part of the problem is they can't do anything till after they open up.
They can't, but they could be ready with a proposed amendment, and I have a really simple one. It's instead of, you know, the legislation right now says multiply by CLA. I would say multiply by
Divide.
0.995 by 95%. Unlink it from the CLA altogether. If it's 95%, then that gives the state a little bit of, you know, reduces the tax paid a little bit. But it's a constant, and it doesn't, you know, an individual town doesn't change by the CLA. And, you know, the other thing, as you guys know from paying your taxes, when you do the statewide property tax for your school tax, they divide by the CLA, which gives you a higher grand list rather than a lower. And you know, the formula right now is multiply by the CLA, which gives you a lower grand list, which results in a smaller pilot.
They figure it out on revenue, not on expense.
It's the same.
And that's fine. So, you
Nailed that
know,
right
my
on.
idea on that would be if the total need for pilot exceeds the revenue collected in any given year, you simply prorate it
Among all the pilots.
among all of the pilot towns. That's too easy, I know.
No, it is. Evan is right, though. They look at revenue.
You know, what do they do in the case of the revenue exceeds the pilot? Where does the revenue go then?
I can guarantee you it doesn't go.
It goes right back into the general fund.
Yeah. Oh,
So
okay, I will,
that's
I will push them along.
that's on your plate, Tom.
Yeah.
I sent it to Ted Brady from PLCT, and I never heard anything back from him. Did you see anything?
So, I mean, trying to keep things moving along,
We need that money from power.
we're not getting into line by line. Your general question was other things. Right? What are you looking for out of the capital equipment?
I just have to finish it. I just have to do it. Put the time in.
And none of those, if you get that plugged in, I'm assuming you're gonna also change. So when you say 3.1% increase,
It's gonna change.
it's gonna change because of the impact of those capital. If you link those.
On the interest, on the contribution and all the things. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so here's the larger question for the board here. Are you having trouble accessing that other sheet, Tom, or are you
Oh,
working
no.
off this sheet? I did try to copy and paste it in. It does copy and paste out of the link.
I just haven't done it.
So that the board knows, my preliminary findings are that we probably need to increase our contribution by $8,000 a year, not 7. But we can talk about that when we have it in front of us.
A contribution to what?
The capital equipment
Oh,
reserve
right.
fund,
Okay.
we have it in there at 165 right now. I think it needs to be 173.
Which will, if you
In-
get that imported in.
Yeah.
And you link that number, it'll be there.
The number just needs to be linked, yeah.
There are 2 numbers that are gonna change. That are gonna make a big impact, and that's the large equipment purchase, and that we budgeted for that backhoe again. We said we're gonna spend 149,000 on that. We did. We're probably not gonna buy that. If we do, we're only gonna buy 20% of the existing backhoe. So with that said, that's gonna make our estimated final drop by quite a bit and have a much larger estimated surplus.
maybe I'm
What do you
confused.
mean we don't have to go up
I mean, if,
8,000?
yeah,
well, we could do that two different ways. We could reduce the amount that we budgeted to come in. Or reduce the amount to go in next year, or, I think you have to, once you get that spreadsheet finished, it'll be more clear. But we said that we're gonna pull $149,910 out of that account that we're not gonna take out. So we're not gonna take it out and we're not gonna spend it. So we can, that's gonna do a couple different things, right? It means that the revenue is gonna change and the expense is gonna change by some amount.
can you explain to me what year we're talking about that in?
For this year,
Because last year, before we sent out the proposed budget, we pushed the tobacco expense of $35,000. Once you average it out over 5 years, we pushed that to 26, 27. We're not. At least last year, we were not planning on bringing that $35,000 in or expensing it, so there should not be a surplus for that.
so when we, in fiscal year 25, we said we're gonna buy a backhoe. It's in the large capital line, we have 149,000. What was that for?
You're just talking the top corner,
This is on the budget spreadsheet, not the capital equipment
the
spreadsheet.
budget spreadsheet.
Yeah,
What line number, please?
Oh, that would be down towards the bottom.
58, 50, 53 dash,
It's like 405
yeah.
ish.
Well, if we're not gonna spend that, that means that money is still in the account.
Where did we say that? Sorry, I'm just looking for the note.
Yeah,
Is it possible that's a note that just didn't get removed, maybe?
Well, so if you look at the estimated final in the budget, so FY 25, out of that account. For line 404, what's 149.10 for?
149,000 910 is $5,800 for truck 18, which is actually 2019, 35,563 for truck 21, $32,008 for truck 20, 18,890 for the salt truck, roughly 60,000 for the grader, and 17,000 for the tractor, which all that totals up to a principal of, and I know that this is slightly skewed because the grader's not perfectly in there. But it totals up to a principal of 149,910 in expense and 12,472 in interest. So it's actually both of those, but that's principal and interest.
So the backhoe is not.
Not in there.
No, it's not.
Okay,
What, if you just shift it over, you can kind of see. It's shifted out to 26, 27, which is exactly what I'm, if you click on the highway reserve. Move your mouse down to the blue tab. And if you just scroll down a little bit, you'll see the backhoe. 35,000, we had shifted to year 26, 27. So we weren't actually encompassing any revenue or expense for that. But
So-
I do agree, the numbers are gonna shift for expense and revenue.
So we're, and again, like. On that same, we're kind of like moving further ahead than I thought we would. But if we're not gonna buy a new backhoe, then all these 35,000's change too.
They change in the sheet that's online. I
And so how does
talked with Jason about proposing a date of replacement. Last year, we were kind of up against the crunch and we said, are we gonna do it or not? And the conversation in the meeting, if I recall, was push it out a couple of years. Cause we spent $10,000 on something for it, some piece of steel or whatever, and it was in good shape.
So, but if we're not budgeting to add 35,000 to spend that out, I mean, we're not, like, isn't that gonna change the amount that we have to add this year? For 26, because it's like projected out to include.
Well, 25, 26 doesn't have the backhoe, but
Well,
once all the links are done to the sheet, like it just adds up all the rows for expense.
that's all,
It shows them in principal and broken out in principal and interest up in the red numbers up above, and those are just what's linked. It's just revenue. It's a reserve fund. It's money in, money out. The only line I was saying in my preliminary findings needs to change is line 405, and that's injection into the reserve fund,
so,
which is shown under annual appropriation right there.
so when last year, when that decision was made. You weren't planning on saving any money towards tobacco this year for 26.
We weren't planning on purchasing it. It's still in there as a future expense, which can show us the the annual expenditures and the annual balances, so we can kind of level out and not pay taxes.
I guess my question is, we like put all this money into the reserve fund in anticipation of buying a backhoe that we're no longer buying. What is the effect of that?
This is not the correct sheet. The effect would just be hit 0 on those 5 lines and call it good.
But are we projecting in 27?
Because didn't we save for that in the future? Like, didn't we save for that like years ago? And then we were gonna spend it out, and then now we're not spending it at all. So does that mean our account is higher so that our projections will be different?
If we weren't planning on future expense, our account would definitely be higher. For sure.
Does anyone follow?
And the question, I guess your question is, we're talking specifically about a backhoe with a payment of $35,000
Right.
projected out over 5 years. If we're not gonna do that, why don't we take that out? And then we can have the discussion about whether or not we wanna replace the backhoe with another piece of equipment or.
But then I think it needs to
Something
happen
else.
before we get to the 7,000 or 8,000 increase, right? Because wouldn't that affect that amount?
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's proposed in 27, 28 in the new one, and the expense is 43,225.87. And that's one that the board hasn't approved. But it has like the updated numbers.
So the one that I'm looking at is in the sheet that you sent out today, which is not the updated sheet, right?
Correct.
And that's showing money going into the annual appropriation of 172. And you were saying it under your spreadsheet,
I was
173.
saying in my preliminary findings that the board needs to approve that it should be 173.
Okay.
But the board does not need to agree with me on that.
Well, I think we need to look at that your proposal. And make the decision whether or not we want to pull that back up.
Certainly.
And that,
Yeah.
you know, that may well change the total annual appropriation that we need going into the fund.
And
Does that make sense?
And are you under the impression that the board made the decision to pull that back out? I'm kind of operating under that decision.
I think our decision was to defer
defer. That's what I remember because
a
we
couple of years, one or 2 years. Because last year we were under the gun. Or was it 2 years ago? We were under the gun. And subsequent to that, as Evan points out, we put a lot of money into the backhoe. We're using it a whole lot less. One question becomes, do we buy the town out?
The
village.
The village out, do we buy the village out at their 20% share? If we do that, that probably needs to. My take is we should take that out of the reserve fund.
I agree.
So if that's what we're gonna do or propose to do, then my guess is our reserve fund sheet should reflect that. Not
But what
the
makes-
purchase of a new back.
certainly should. Yeah.
Feel like we're making a policy decision here.
It's not really a policy, it's a future decision. Tom, can you?
Nothing you have to live with.
Can you
Touche.
check with Jason? Just to ask comfort level on just nixing replacement of the backhoe altogether. Or if there's a deferred, just for information. I understand it's a board decision. But there was some reason why we picked a certain year and I pushed it out one more year. And the one that I had built.
Well, at the time, if I remember correctly, Jason was advocating that we buy an excavator. And we didn't want to do that. And there was a question about the longevity of the backhoe, so we said. Because it was a question of replacing the backhoe or an excavator, so we said, we don't want to do an excavator and let's push the backhoe out another year or two.
And I think in that same year, you put 10 grand into repairing the backhoe, so it wasn't as pressing to replace.
Plus it's got a new set of tires.
Well, and we were
At a
going down that
discount price.
rabbit hole of a tracked excavator versus a retired excavator.
Yeah, those decisions we've talked about, but we haven't made. Made those decisions. So I think once again, we're back at the same point we were at here.
Okay, so have
Take it
we,
back over.
Can you,
yes, take it back up.
well, I'm just,
Yeah, on it.
is the capital budget gonna be completed by our next?
It was my goal to do it today, but it didn't happen. You know, it was my goal to do it Friday, and Thursday, but then we had some dog issues. And so my goal is hopefully, you know, that was my target today and it didn't happen, so let's do it tomorrow.
Okay,
We could do it Wednesday. if you want.
There you go.
right,
Do people agree that it's a good idea to have money in the capital reserve fund to buy out? And I guess we don't really know what the buyout amount would be, but maybe that's something Jason could get a handle on, is what would our cost be to buy out the village?
So there's two different ways to look at that. There's an appraisal and then there's trade-in value. And like, what do you want Jason to get?
well, we already
I wanna
have,
find out the least amount of value and pay that.
we already have the trade-in, right?
This is a public meeting.
It's fine. Everybody knows I'm a cheapskate.
What's the trade-in here?
It's like 50,000.
Yeah, somewhere right around there.
So we're looking at $10,000, somewhere between 10 and 15 to buy out.
If, is it our sense that they want to sell?
Yeah,
Well, they
Yeah.
certainly said that at one point.
they did. And we were all hot to trot on this a few months ago.
You know, Will presented an idea. I don't like it because it's
Yeah,
not
it's 50,000,
clean, but it is a good idea that no cash exchange hands. The only reason they need the backhoe is for emergency repairs. They rent an a little mini for everything else. For planned repairs, they rent a mini. For emergencies, they have to use the backhoe. And so, and then Will, I don't know if you remember at the joint meeting, Will suggested, what if we don't exchange cash, but every time we use it in an emergency, we'll still have access to it. The village would have access to it. And then pay down. That would pay down our debt to them.
At a rate of so much per hour.
Some agreed upon rate, exactly.
It just gets messy.
I think we did,
We
I
didn't
don't
go for
think
that.
we liked that idea,
We wanted it clean. We wanted to
yeah.
sell it outright and then rent it back to them. And years ago, there was always some kind of problem about maintenance of it. And who was doing this and who was doing that to it, as I recall.
Can you
So
tell me where you're showing all the mowing expense?
It's under building and grounds, select board expense.
so where was that left? We're gonna get Jason to look into what it's worth.
Yeah, I have Jason.
It's 50,000 trade-in.
That's what it
We
is.
have a quote.
I have him get an appraisal and then I'm gonna have him make sure he's copacetic with nixing the replacement altogether.
Okay, so
But that was 2 years ago. That 50 green trade.
No, that was like a month ago.
was it for 50 grand?
Yeah,
Yeah, you got a problem. Sometimes your appraisal might be more than your trading value.
a new one's 174.9.
So. If you go select board expense, building and grounds,
You have the specs on that.
Yeah, I can send them to you.
line number 232. $15,000. So the bid last year was,
232.
so buildings and ground expense,
Okay,
under select board.
and we think that's pretty accurate.
Well, it was an $18,000 is what we paid last year for everything. Some of that included joint properties.
Somebody included what?
Joint properties. So this is one of the things that happened with the bid, and I think we might have shot ourselves in the foot for cleaner accounting, is that when we tell people to say, what's the price for this, and this? They price it out as if it's each individual spot and then add them all up. There's no opportunity for a bulk discount when you do that. And I think maybe the RFP process sort of shot ourselves. We do need to know what the building costs, this building costs separate from all the sold town properties, but. You know, that's like, I always wondered, is that why the price jumped from 9,000 to 18,000, or was it just the cost of doing business increase? And all the other quotes were also, you know, that was the lowest one, there were some as high as 26.
I suspect that part of the reason Robert and Sons increased the price so much was A, because they could. And B, they hadn't increased the price in about 10 years.
Right, exactly.
So,
They were stunningly cheap forever.
yeah. That makes sense to me. I just want to make sure like all references to mowing kind of line up, like I see, you know, a note for the skate park about their tree removal, blah, 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 mowing, but that's
So
like
we
an
hired
increased mowing
Greg, the
expense.
town doesn't have a brush hog. So Robert and Sons mows like the short grass, but then Greg Fatigate brush hogs the infield and the outfield. Yeah,
There's a lot of brush hog field down there.
there is. So
There's the wildflower patch, don't forget that.
if we had a brush hog,
I should say.
I don't know that it's worth it, but that's another thing our guys could do with an existing tractor is for 2,500 and a heavy duty brush hog, we might. There's an opportunity to buy a mower and. You know, but. I haven't been able to talk Jason into doing it yet, and especially now that we have the landfill to do every other year too, that's an additional expense.
What are they mowing the rail trail with right now?
I think they use a boom mower on a tractor.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. So those are two new expenses. That we could, one new expense. Next year will be the landfill, and then the only other brush hogging we have, I think, is just the skate park, isn't it?
I'm not sure, it was just a clarifying one.
Yeah,
Does the board have any,
Landfill's a pain.
does the board have any other line items they specifically want to talk about here? Did you follow up with all of the insurances and update that whole sheet on actual costs? Because there was a question.
I did for Justin, and it's specifically who I looked at.
Okay. And are we budgeting appropriately for everybody?
They're on estimated salaries, there's a line of blue. Where for you guys to review. There's each employee's number of total hours, there's. Donna's has an increase that I want to make sure that we're mindful of because of new minutes, like I never actually checked in with you yet here to say. You know, since we've added some new committees. You know,
There is a couple of items that we gotta cover in estimated salaries, which you have all linked up, so it'll show us
yeah,
real time. I don't know which one in blue. That doesn't really answer my question about health insurance, but I think we're good because we're budgeting for a potential 10% increase.
for health insurance,
Yeah,
the health insurance should be linked up.
I think it is.
What in the world are we gonna do about healthcare, crying out loud? You know, we've been kicking this down the road for a lot of years. We were gonna look into this self-funding thing, but you thought that was,
We're not big enough.
you don't think we're big enough?
They changed the funding, how it used to. The way that Blue Cross Blue Shield and MVP used to.
Oh, yeah, I get it.
Spread it out,
We've been over this.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
They changed the rules, so it kind of made people not want to do it,
Yeah,
and it made it cost prohibitive.
as long as those are all accurate. You had mentioned estimated salaries. Are David and our two newest employees, are they in there accurately for their step increases?
That's like why that's blue for years and skills. It's, that's one thing that I need to sit down. They're in for their current pay rate and their increase for cost of living allocation. But what I don't know is what steps are we anticipating over the next year, what training and what years of service?
I mean, years of service should be pretty straightforward. I know we're gonna hit that. And that will increase for at least 2. For the league. But you gotta ask Jason what skill level they're at.
We're gonna continue to maintain 5 in public works.
That's a conversation for the board once we have the final budget in front of us. Maybe, maybe not.
I know at one point early on, we talked about audit reserves.
Yeah, the audit, using the audit reserve fund to cover the select board expense of the annual audit.
There's 46,923 in there right now.
Right.
We have year to date spent 5,600. Shouldn't the estimated final be at least 5,600?
Absolutely. So those are, if you, it was in the email, it wasn't in front of you tonight. But I just got a huge, over a month's worth of bills received into the general ledger earlier today, so. In the email, it says pay attention to year to date versus estimated final. And that there's gonna be, I think you're gonna find a lot of those, because I literally just updated this after meeting with Rosemary.
Yeah,
There was a lot of bills that weren't in the last budget that just got entered in.
So that estimated year end should probably be closer to the 96 that we budgeted. You know,
Yeah, there's a reason Rosemary told me 5,600. Can I make a purple and check in with her?
and then the 9650 that you've got highlighted under the proposed 26, your question is,
Use the reserve or not?
yeah. So there's not actually a reserve fund
it's a cash on
for
hand.
that. It's reserved in the cash on hand. So I think what we would propose in the budget would be to dedicate 9650 of the cash on hand to the audit expense.
So I'm showing it as an expense and a revenue. 9650, so it balances. How,
Yeah, I think you're good. Correct me if I'm wrong, Duncan. It's shown under obligated funds as revenue. That just ties back to our earlier conversation about that being a little wonky. Are you saying that you want another line for cash on hand?
I guess I'm saying that if it's in the cash on hand, we shouldn't show it as revenue. We should show it as a reduction to the cash on hand dedicated to the audit expense.
so how do we show that? Where would you show
You lost me.
the money?
I don't
tax?
understand that either, Duncan. I understand what you're getting at, but I don't understand if it's cash on hand. It's cash on hand,
It is,
but you're asking for reserve cash on hand. For this, is that the correct terminology?
yeah, so it gets subtracted from if we propose it to be 9650 to be used to meet the audit expense, then we would subtract it from this spreadsheet,
I understand.
which reduces the amount of available cash on hand.
But you threw in a reserve, and that's what caused the crisis in my little mind.
Yeah, to think of reserve it as different from setting it into a reserve.
Okay,
fund.
that's where I started to have problems.
Yeah. Reserve in the context that I mean is subtract it from
That
cash
I
on hand.
understand,
the check.
Yes, that's
Basically.
perfectly fine. When you said reserve it, I was,
But you're gonna show
Make
it,
it.
like if you look at last year's budget,
Why?
we have a list of things that we are proposing to, reserve, probably not the right term. But if you look at last year's budget, we have proposed reservations. Reduced taxes, 110,000, buildings and grounds, 20,000. Reappraisal fund, 20,000.
let's change that word for this year's budget, for town report.
If we, yeah, I mean, if we can come up with a better,
I think that's wording. Tom has it shown up. At least accounted for. I think do we have direction for Tom? Because I feel like we're kind of talking in a circle on this one.
well, that's, I guess at the end of the day, I want to see something like what we had in last year's budget.
Which Rosemary prepared.
Which is a
correct?
listing of all of the, it's this list,
Mhm.
which Tom can certainly input as long as Rosemary's said that these are the right numbers. What's not right in here is the reserve funds need to have added to them, so like I'm understand that this is a year-end report, 2023 cash on hand, okay? So at the same meeting where we approved the cash on hand report from Rosemary, we also approved the reservations from last year. So each and every one of these reservations that are in the town report, 20,000 to the reappraisal fund. Reappraisal fund needs to be 97,754 plus 20,000. Okay, because we approved verbatim what was in the town report last year.
You got that, Tom?
So each one of these,
Are you talking
reserve-
about showing it or the discussion of what the actual value is in it?
No, the select board is obligated as of June 30th to delegate all unexpended funds to reserves. And what he's saying is that action should have happened on July 1st, 2024. And so these accounts are the end of, as of July 1st, 2024, it's plus 20,000 because kind of the motion is a little behind, but that's essentially what you're doing is you're pre-approving. You approved that 20,000 and it should have been in there as of July 1st, 2024. Because the end of 2023, we had a surplus. You're obligated under law to do something with that surplus, or it goes to when it goes to lower taxes in the next year. And you're saying, and the board made a motion to do 20,000 there, and it needs to show as of July 1st, 2024.
Yeah, a different way of saying what you just said, I think, is the voters by approving the budget, approve
The
those
reservation.
reservations. Therefore, these numbers that are in here should probably reflect the additional numbers. In the past, the way we have done it was the board actually made a specific motion to approve what was in the budget for reservations. Proposed reservations.
Seems a little corny.
It is, I mean, if the statute has been amended to require that's good.
Then that's what ought to happen.
Yeah.
Well, I
So
think,
do you know what you're gonna get from Rosemary now?
yeah, I'm just gonna take the town report and I'm gonna say, Rosemary, update this as of July 1, 2024. She's gonna say, okay.
Yeah, so she can basically take all of these balances as of 2023 and add, 20,000, 20,000, 20,000.
Taking the top and pushing it down, yeah.
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 Okay.
And then I think all that works. So, to get back to your point, Mark, if we show the 9650 as being, for lack of a better term, reserved from the cash on hand.
Dedicated.
Dedicated, there you go. Then I think it has the effect when you get to the bottom. There's an amount to be raised by taxes, right? After you apply the estimated reserve fund and all of that good stuff, there's an amount to be raised by taxes. So if you subtract it from the cash on hand to begin with, then it becomes in essence, part of the revenue. It's just a
How
little.
did this town exist before tonight?
Can I grab a synopsis here?
Please.
Tom, do you understand what Duncan is asking for?
In.
Would you repeat it back so that,
Well, I agree with him. We're getting into the wordiness of how it's done and presented. At the end of the day, we're planning on money showing up and spending it. It's a net zero either way. If we continue down this road, we're just talking about how to show it.
Yes, and since there is not a specific reserve fund for the audit expense, maybe it's another reserve fund we need.
Oh, man.
I'm not advocating it, but since it's shown as part of the cash on hand. And Rosemary's indicating it, I think it needs to come out of part of the cash on hand
Mhm.
that's shown in our annual budget. That's I guess all I'm trying to say. Does that make sense, Tom?
Yeah,
you sure? You don't look convincing to me.
to me, because I think, to me, he's explaining what I already know. To me, it's fundamental. I think if things were more in tune, if the year closed closer to July 1, the conversation would be more of a direction to Rosemary, okay, this is what we want you to do. But since the years are so expended out, it's like, oh, this should have happened as soon as the year closed, because that's what we directed to do. It just never happened. We're like getting caught up on that direction.
Yeah, we're 6 months behind.
Exactly.
We're building a budget for
6 months ahead.
7 months ahead of now, based on data that we had from 3 months ago.
No, it's corny to say the least.
Another big one that will affect the tax rate, and we talked about this at the last meeting, would be the hours that we budget for the town administrator on the estimated salaries. I mean, we can plug it in there for a full year and talk about it more later. But we need a budget for it, if that's what we're gonna spend. Right? I don't know if the board put much thought into it. Between
32
last
versus
32 versus 40. But since everything's linked up, we can see the real,
because right now, correct me if I'm wrong, it's in there at 32.
yeah, it's budgeted at 32.
Yeah. So we move some things around.
Huh?
So we move some things around. So if we look at that.
What did we move around?
I'm not really sure. I'm a little nervous right now. That's why I saved them at certain timestamps.
Can you scroll down a little?
What line are you on there, but
I was on the top. That's the part that I wanted people to understand is that's percentage. That is slower, so we added more to an expense on it. Oh, while we're right here, this 5,000 for Old Mill Park upgrades. I think we can save money instead of hiring out a Harley rig. We have 5 guys who are all qualified to operate one. Just rent it and do it on labor. I think we can get a lot of work done with our public works guys.
That's where the change was right there. You must have undone. But regardless,
but that's a board discussion. 32 versus 40 that we need to have.
yeah, we talked about it last meeting. I mean, if we carry it at 40, it'll be another percent. Yeah, give or take, right?
And I think we may want to have that final discussion when we're actually at the point where we can figure out what the impact on tax rates can be.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, we need to know what our surplus is to know what to apply.
I have, if you go down to the right between revenue and expense, I have a little formula that plugs it in. We're looking at about 64,000 now. At the estimated
Surplus.
total surplus
Because our estimated finals are kind of,
all over the place.
God, that doesn't seem like.
And I would just
it'll be a-
suggest
it'll be
that
100.
that's not the right numbers.
Yeah, it's just revenue minus
Yeah, that's just revenue minus expense.
Yeah, it's just
So what we really need to know is, that's.
and this is gonna
Thank
make,
you, but all of these numbers that Rosemary provided on this sheet
yeah,
are part of the total amount of, that we have available. So for example, also we've always done it this way. I don't know if it's the right way to do it or not, but we have always budgeted an estimated amount of tax uncollected balance of tax in there. So if you look at this sheet, and if you have any questions on it, Val, get in touch with me. But that number, I think, is, I hope it's really low.
The delinquent taxes,
Meaning, you
Delinquent
hope
tax.
the amount to be collected is low, or the total amount of delinquent taxes?
No, the number that he's showing of 64,000, that is simply a function of revenue minus expense.
Yeah, that's
And that-
low.
That's not the amount that we would necessarily have available to apply to reduce tax.
3 times.
I hope so.
Hmm.
I hope so. So really, in order to really get to the bottom line of, how much is available, we need to look at the balance of cash on hand, the delinquent tax due, estimated current, so that number is just one number out of about 3 or 4 numbers that we need to look at in order to be able to come up with the
Yeah.
total amount available.
this is slightly sneaky. You know how we talked about maybe doing away with this in the future?
And I'd love to, but and we've got to come up with a plan of how to do that.
I mean, to do away with it. I'm no expert. I think we'll be sitting at 11 to 13% increase.
In the future, this is what I think it'll look like. Or that's all that the board would delegate out,
In the future, that's probably exactly what.
which is, I guess, slightly sneaky.
Well,
Because, it's like, anyways, you got it.
yeah, and well, it would, it's, in a perfect world, I think it would be that. In the reality, I think it would be the audited balance of the prior year's fiscal,
This was last year,
as it might relate
the year
to the-
before.
And I think when we, next
22.
year,
Yep.
we're on the wave, but we might say, oh, there's 64,000. Hey, you know what? Let's do the clock tower and the. Because we're anticipating a surplus of this, and you're gonna try to land as close to 0. This would be an indicator of trying to take on another project.
Yeah, to me, the bigger important thing is how much, even if we somehow estimate what that number is, we're still gonna need to apply some amount to reduce taxes.
Yeah,
Because it's just, if we don't, it's gonna, like you said, it's gonna be a 10 or 11% increase in tax.
Well, it'd be 5.5% just nixing that 110,000.
Yeah.
if,
So,
If everything was the same and nothing went
Yeah.
up.
I mean, that's a future discussion that we need to put on whole business,
Huh?
but we do need to have that discussion.
You want me to change these hours so people can see?
It'll be a percent, sure, change it.
So just,
what? I asked Rosemary today if there was any ARPA money that was loose. She said, no, it's all designated, basically.
Well, it all went into that reserve fund, but
Right.
there is some money in that reserve fund.
significant, 0.85%.
I didn't get the impression from Rosemary saying there was money left in that. She thought it was all going to the light industrial park.
So I think that reserve fund has. I did a spreadsheet at one point in time.
I mean, it's in the reserve. fund.
It's in the reserve
in the
fund, but
reserve
it's
fund.
dedicated. Let's put it like that.
Yeah, but it's not necessarily, all of it's not necessarily dedicated to the industrial park. There is some of that money that is available for other.
It was,
Yeah.
what,
It's 15,000 or something.
well, it's
15,000.
more than that
Not a huge
now.
amount, but
But 10 or 15 here and there.
Yeah, but you're talking about availability to use it to reduce taxes. We cannot use that reserve fund to reduce taxes. That money's tied.
We
Doesn't
can't,
matter.
we could, but if somebody's proposing a plan that requires a town match,
We could budget for
we
it.
could budget for it in that case.
Oh, because you moved to put it into the grant match reserve fund. I see.
Right.
Got it.
Oh, I thought we rolled it right into the general fund
That was,
You could withdraw.
we did,
to get around ARPA.
we did roll it into the general fund to get around ARPA requirements, but last year.
But there was also.
At town meeting, we proposed to the voters to put it in the grant match reserve fund.
Yeah.
And
And they
that's
approved
why,
that?
I mean, you got the same sheet I did on the,
Under that same theory, Mark, you're bringing up, like at the end of the budget process, one thing I used to do was you'd run through all your funds with the board.
Yeah.
And you say, are there any projects that we could use the Union Bank reappraisal, that we could use building and grounds, that we could use? And so there's one way that you can, it's the same idea that you're saying, but you're identifying the project. Let's say buildings and grounds, we're gonna say, okay, well, we're gonna pull 30,000 to do the clock tower. And so you would reduce the amount of taxes by 30,000. We're already doing that. Yeah, it's actually 25,000. But by going reserve by reserve, you kind of bring up, a lot of times reserve funds get forgotten. You're
Well,
not thinking about.
what I'm trying to do is find income.
Yeah. And I think, we could use bridge and culvert fund to look at maybe some, if there's any repairs on the bridges that we're doing.
are we already planning on that?
I'm just gonna run it through, I'm not
Yeah.
sure, just
Like
like
he's just.
conceptually, the idea of, but to me, I always did
So
that at
you
the
found
very end.
$50,000 in reserve funds that,
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, they're money in, money out, right? So if,
but if we can reduce taxes with it.
heard.
Be patient with me.
Yeah,
Tom, can I make just
That's right.
a quick
that's a nice question.
comment, suggestion?
Please. Let's go.
Which
Three
I
for
think you can
$12.
correct fairly easily, on these sheets. Seeing it on this one. I did see it on this one. There was at the bottom of each, oh, here it is. So like at the bottom of, it's line one, look at line 151. All the way across, there's a red number, 12.27%
That's the percentage that it represents of the budget.
of the total budget, but that needs
it
to be
didn't-
shifted
Yeah,
over.
it's linked to column out.
Yeah,
Right.
it just, if you could change that in just in one formula, I think you can cut and paste it on.
It'd be better to just do a pie graph or something, but that's different.
This is mostly for us. This really, I don't think this even shows up in the budget.
Doesn't.
And there are pie graphs that get put in the budget, but I mean, for me, this was handy just to see what total percent of law, what total percent public safety was of the total budget. And it's not gonna change much by shifting those over, but
Yeah, I agree.
just a small thing.
Peter, do you have anything you'd like to talk about?
You,
Mike,
but it is all making sense to
is it?
me. It is.
I'm
Oh,
glad.
boy, I think you must have a defect in personality.
It's possible.
You said it making sense to him?
That's what he said.
Yeah. You sure you're all there?
It might be the heat.
It could be that.
Well, I kind of stripped down, but
Boy, I am,
it is,
Right,
it is hot in here.
I'm gonna do that like that's all.
It says it's like 82, 83 in here, but it's set 72.
so.
That's
To-
just kind of something too that my ex-wife used to like.
So, to get to maybe just reiterating Duncan's point. Well, once all the numbers are updated. I'm just gonna take a little while. once all the numbers are updated, Tom, if you go down to 486. You can kind of see the formula, how we arrive at these numbers, right? What, like if all those could get filled out, actual cash on hand balances, delinquent taxes, available uncommitted cash on hand. And those will spit us out. They'll spit out the amount that we have to reduce taxes.
Those are the suggested amounts.
Don't even know the process, but I mean, like 478 delinquent taxes due. I would assume that that's an
You can
actual
get
amount
that
from Rosemary.
number from Rosemary.
But you have a different sheet than the one that you sent out at 4, so I don't have the sheet that you're working on, but
This is the, it's the same sheet. I just
maybe it's just
saved as midway through the meeting.
So. To add to Evan's
like
point, if you
I haven't
look, if you
went to
look
read
at
the
the one that's in
470.
there
I
right
thought it's
now,
460.
lines 444 through 466
Yeah,
would need to be updated with
those numbers.
Rosemary's sheet.
Those are all purple, so we didn't get a chance to get to it today, but anything purple, she's gonna fill in. Back with that tomorrow.
But in all fairness, the proposed amount to reduce taxes, can you at least enter that at 110 in the draft that you have? No, way up. Where you have it at 67. Because, we're talking about percent increases and they're skewed.
It's gonna change it by 50,000.
Yeah, which is 2%.
Yeah. So
I mean, it'll be 40,000, but yeah, just pop it. For now, yeah, 110 and just leave it orange.
Yeah.
Do you have your delinquent taxes with?
So I would,
No, I look.
putting it in there at 110 right now, Tom, is fine, but if you use the spreadsheet. We sort of reverse engineer those numbers. And you can actually down here at line, well, on the one that I've got, it's line 490. To reduce taxes FY 90, FY 25 budget. It's in there, you got 110 under column AO. But that's the real time piece that I think is really handy. Is if we change 110 to 120, it automatically.
Oh,
and you
you're saying just link the two
link,
cells.
if you link that cell to the cell up above,
yeah,
then it automatically updates that number and we can see real time.
all of these, I'm not sure. When I was inserting rows and columns. Inserting rows. If they all shifted down and up, and I have to bring that all back. One of the things I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go back to that October 8th spreadsheet before I manipulated anything. I was gonna rebuild off of that, like copy and paste from like the earliest. And then go back and then replace it all, because they're not, I don't know.
They don't line up with the categories.
So I have no idea what's the hell the number, so I don't have a reference point.
Oh.
And that was like the strategy I was gonna do. But, cause I don't have it, they don't, if you look at the bottom, they don't really line up well.
Yeah,
Does anybody have the delinquent taxes?
What's that?
Does anybody have the delinquent tax sheet with them tonight?
I don't have it tonight.
Are there any other questions on the budget or do we want to move on to the second item?
When you were talking about delinquent taxes, one of the big problems is we haven't had a tax sale in a considerable amount of time, length of time, and there's nothing that scares up some tax money. Sometimes there's a threat of a tax sale, and we need to really get on that. I understand that the rules and regulations have changed on that, and I understand that we're having a difficult time finding an attorney to handle this tax sale for us. But there has to be somebody out there that can do this for us. And we need to get on this really as quick as possible. Because we can generate a tremendous amount of money just by delinquent taxes.
Rosemary just went to a tax sale training. You want me to see if she can come to the 1/6 meeting to give a report on what a tax sale would entail?
Yeah, so I'd like to know that, because I've asked her numerous times about it, and she said the rules are changing, the laws changed and everything else, and it's more difficult to do a tax sale.
The main, I think the main difference now is, it's a year from the date that you start, like, you pay monthly, it's a year from the date of your last payment as opposed to a year of,
Give me one.
like, yeah, there's. Where people were, and it has to be more than 1 year, so I think, but because we have old enough tax sale records, I think we still qualify to move forward.
Oh, yeah, and we've got years and years stacked up.
So we want to know what it entails. And then one thing that I used to do a long time ago is that I would hate budgeting delinquent taxes, but I would budget based on the number of tax years that were more than 2 years old that were eligible for tax sale. And that way, it was the select board could then direct the delinquent tax director to start the tax sale process, so you could guarantee at least that much.
Was that just an estimate though, or were you?
No, it's all
saying-
calculated. You just like put a delinquent tax report, it spits it right out.
The reason we budgeted delinquent taxes in the past is, and again, this is based on Rosemary's information, but as a general rule of thumb, the amount of money that she receives on an annual basis, it may not be the same delinquent taxes, but she is basically bringing in
The same
a
percent.
very similar amount of money
Correct.
on an annual basis. It may not be resulting from a tax sale or in a particular tax year, but she's bringing in basically that amount of money. So we should, whether we call it delinquent taxes or something else, we should be budgeting that amount of money. Or
So
some amount.
are you saying she looks and says we're $100,000 in delinquent taxes, typically we get 10?
Yes,
And you know that over a course of time, there's property transfers, there's people catching up, there's. all
No,
sorts
but
of-
I mean,
Yeah,
Rosemary will have a history. If
Yeah.
it's a percent that we should budget.
yes, and in the past, she has always said, we bring in about as much as we budget in delinquent taxes, so it should be John's revenue.
Yeah. And is that not here?
It's just not updated. It's in the sheet.
It's in our, yeah, it's in the sheet, it's not updated yet. And without having all of those pieces, we're not gonna be able to say, that's part of what I was saying in my email response to Tom this morning was, if we shave $10,000 from this line item, if all of those pieces are in there, we can see real time what impact that has on the tax rate, on the amount to be raised by taxes.
we do budget in the first page, upper right, it says late tax penalty revenue. So there's an 8% penalty on all delinquent taxes. And that's 17,500 that's budgeted is from Rosemary for that to represent that penalty. And then the 25,000 is the interest of delinquent taxes.
Which is set by statute.
Yeah, I think you guys charge 1.5%.
Right.
And then Rosemary gets those, she gave me those numbers, and so you kind of have been budgeting those amounts all along.
The voters could change it.
It's America.
That's 8%.
What's interesting is like.
You're talking about the penalty?
Yeah,
Is I don't see where.
Or
I think there's an article every year.
Every year that they can actually amend that.
Right.
To 4% if they wanted
They could, or 12%.
I don't know.
20. For nothing, whatever.
Right,
Those numbers down,
Pay tax.
those numbers down below. are usually with rosemary, so. He has them in purple. I think we're,
How much time do you think you need to get all of this book? I would love to see something that we can sit down and say, let's shave $10,000 off of that and see what the tax rate is. How long do you realistically think
I
you
think,
need to do that?
I do think we're really close. One is the capital equipment, that's gonna hopefully be done tomorrow, I'm working tomorrow. And then everything else that you directed today. I hopefully.
Realistically, not hopefully.
Yeah,
That's what
realistically.
that's
No
what I'm
hope in
thinking.
here.
Monday, I'm hammered with a lot of meetings.
Well, and next week, you're like on vacation part of the week. That's a lost week, that isn't it?
I'm gonna be working, but my hours are gonna be very inconsistent.
Yeah.
So I'm still gonna be making phone calls and checking email and working on this, but I have the kids. And they don't have school.
Yeah.
So rather than say that I'm available from 9 to 4 or 9 to 5 or 8 to 6, you guys are gonna, it's not real. So I'd rather tell you I'm not there.
Yeah.
And then tell you that I'm available, call my phone.
I'd rather you tell us that.
Exactly, like, so will I have it before the end of this week? I don't think so.
No,
But I do think my goal will probably be before New Year's, because then. After New Year's, I think that Thursday, Friday of this week, like I get my kids for the first time for Christmas. And then Thursday, Friday of the next week, they go in my last 2 days with them before they're gone for another week.
so that's the second, third, they're gone.
They're
Do we have a regular
I'm
meeting on
gone.
the 6th?
on the 6th, yeah.
Yeah, so my goal would be if I could have it done by December 31st,
But you won't.
maybe I will. I'm gonna surprise you.
Can we get rid of maybes? Like,
Are your
we're
eyes dilated?
asking for your input.
Yeah.
Do you think?
I'm saying December 31st and I'm being questioned. So I guess if you think it should be later, let me know.
I think realistically,
Yeah,
we should plan on a budget work session meeting. Either sometime the week of the 6th or the 13th.
That
You
is,
said-
that is item number 4. We have item number 3 to go over, but I guess we can shift it.
We can, I guess since we were still on budget, I was trying to get a realistic sense when. How far out.
If we push it off, are you just gonna procrastinate?
possible. Because, I mean, really what's interesting from this, I see here. Where we're at is, we're already starting that phase of like. Taking 10,000 here, adding 10,000 there. We're really close, and we covered some big conceptual items. So once those new accounts are in place, if Rosemary can get those in, that's gonna be really clean.
Is Rosemary working on
I'm
Friday?
gonna reiterate, I think you should put them in.
I create the account
You create the line in our budget.
and tell her
And
that.
you coordinate with her at some future date and say, now, if you have difficulty figuring out what the chart of account number should be. You can coordinate that with her, but I don't think that's, worst case scenario, leave the chart of account number blank. And
Well-
have the line in there.
Like line 62 is kind of an example of that, is I had that children's
Yeah.
playground.
Yeah.
That's in a cash on hand account, and I didn't know how to show it as a revenue, so tonight, like this little scramble that I had, I added that. Just to your point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so, and again. I guess I don't want that to hold up the budget, just trying to coordinate that piece, because I
That's-
think you can do that after.
That's excellent
Yeah.
clarity, and I think just making sure Rosemary knows exactly what to add.
Yeah.
She'll put the numbers in, that might not end up in the same place, but at least it's in there.
Yeah. Yeah, and if we have to adjust, once the chart of account. I mean, as you know, the chart of accounts is all based on sequential number.
No, I mean, I think, I really appreciate that clarity, because I would have sped up. There were things I might have done last week that I didn't want to do until I met with her today, so.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know if the rest of the board agrees with this, just my opinion, but to me, it's more important. It's our budget. It's more important to get it in our spreadsheet than it is to nest with the chart of accounts at this point. I think the chart of accounts can certainly nest with our budget once we get a budget.
Deal.
Mhm.
Mark,
I'm peaceful.
Peter?
I always think of it as Rosemary's budget.
you,
Not fine.
is that clear?
It's your chart of accounts.
It's Rosemary's money.
It's your chart of accounts.
Yeah.
I will be on her tomorrow to really clean up the bond. That's really gonna show up in the amount.
That's the critical piece right now, I think,
Yep.
getting those numbers in there.
That's from your new directive, that's what I see as the next.
You want me to come in and help you?
I'd love if you could hold my hand.
So I don't know if we narrowed down a date here.
No, we didn't there. That
Do we want to do that now? I'm perfectly happy waiting until it comes up on the agenda. I just wanted to get. You know,
Okay,
a more realistic idea of when we should be thinking about it.
13.
I'm living on borrowed time tonight, so, maybe setting a meeting now would be good.
let's do it. Except for. Let's do it.
All right, we have a regular meeting on the 6th, right?
Correct.
Does anybody want to do it another night that week, or you want to wait until the week of the 13th? You said drop dead date is the 24th of January, basically.
Yes.
So we had to
Do
have
we-
another meeting.
Do we want to plan on bumping up on the drop dead date?
no.
That's already bumped up. It's not a dead date, it's just a dead date. It's the oh shit, it's not the oh shit date, it's just the oh no day.
What about Wednesday, the 8th?
I can do that.
You can do that.
You get that, Donna? No, what Tom just said.
Thank you.
Just forget it.
Thank God for my phone. I would have come at 6:30, but Evan and then my phone said 5 o'clock, Mark, 5 o'clock.
Yeah, I know.
What time do we want to start on the?
Is everybody good with the 8th?
Fine with me.
Yeah. I think if I can get that to you by the 31st, so you can give me new directives.
What time?
Well, how are you gonna,
We're all overpaid anyway.
I think we've given-
As well.
do you have any questions on any of the directive we've discussed? Because if you get it to us on the 31st, and then somebody provides directives, are you going to change that?
My point is, if I can get say I get it to you on the 31st, before we meet. And then you guys look at it and you say, hey, Tom, there's a problem. Then I have time to fix it before the 6th. My only concern about the 8th is that anything that comes out of the 6th, there's not a lot of time to put it in action before the 8th. And so that's what my point is, if we can nail a lot of it down between now and the 6th, then the 8th works. But if there's not a lot done between now and the 6th, between the 6th and the 8th might be not enough time to implement any changes. My only thought.
So you're saying you would have all of the directives tonight addressed by,
The 31st.
That's my target. I mean, I'm gonna be in here tomorrow by myself.
Rosemary is gonna be here with you, isn't she?
Is she? I might bring her a present.
you said you were meeting with her tomorrow, right? To go over everything on the bottom.
You
You
know what?
did say that.
So she
Everybody's
is-
been kidding.
I guess.
Well,
They used to take half a day.
Maybe that's- Cause we rushed out of that. I'm gonna text her right now.
text her, see if she's planning on, tell her.
But I have a feeling that tomorrow, my kids aren't around, so I'm gonna stay here late, cause I got nothing else to do.
Well, that's
So
good.
we'll have
Pretty
it
generous.
by the 31st. And then
You
we'll-
say nobody's gonna be here tomorrow?
I think it's a half day.
Okay.
Excuse
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Sorry to interrupt you.
Could we put a hold on January 8th? Just so it's there if we need it?
Oh, we're gonna need it.
We'll need it.
We're gonna need it.
Question is, are we gonna have what we need?
Yeah.
It's not that we're not gonna need it, it's gonna be, are we gonna have what we need?
The 9th might be better, if you can, just like one more day between, just to like, what if you say do X, Y, Z, and you gotta make sure you can do it.
So you want to have it on the 31st. We'll talk about the budget for 1 hour on the 6th and then another on the 9th.
Oh, I don't think I'm gonna meet you on the 31st.
No, you're gonna have it to the board
Yeah,
with all
yeah.
directives from tonight addressed by the 31st.
That's my target.
What's your backup target?
I'm not gonna need,
You will not need one. Okay. And you want to push to the 9th.
Give
Is the
people the
9th?
9th instead of the 8th.
that'll just give one more day.
I can do the night.
9th at 6 PM.
It's good. I have.
Do whatever.
therapy
Ninth at
Thursday,
6?
I'll be over
Yeah,
and,
9th, 6 PM. Mark, you heard that.
6.
9
6 p.m.
6
9
p.m.
to 6 PM.
9th,
Not 5.
6 PM.
6.
6 PM.
I put it in my phone. My phone calls me and says, half an
Same.
hour beforehand, get your ass there.
Same agenda.
Yeah, certainly. We'll have more to go over.
So do you think we'll get to we'll talk a little bit about the warning tonight. Do you think we'll nail the warning down 6?
I think we'll be darn close to nailing that down.
Agenda,
Yeah,
that if you don't need it.
yep, certainly.
On the 6th, we're gonna have some big. There's a lot of changes to the listers. I don't know if you guys saw that email. So that's gonna be a big topic on the 6th. You want the 6th to be all budget.
Will mostly be, it'll have to mostly be that. So, I mean, Jason has a report. Right,
Mostly in the packet, I guess. Maybe he'll talk about a mower.
I mean, if all of your questions with his budget are addressed, then it's not needed. Rosemary will be here for that meeting. Correct. That'd be good to focus on the budget. Wow.
Let's get her here.
I have her coming for the tax sale anyways that day, so it'll be good.
Okay. All right, anything else on the budget? Do you have any questions about anything? Any board member, Tom? Is all clear?
Peter, here's your
Yes.
chance. You can ask all the questions. you've been
This is the
holding back.
zinger, Peter.
All night long, you've been building up for this.
We're setting the stage.
Ask a good one.
Now,
Okay,
Okay.
And so
next item is talking about articles. Next item up is discussing the articles on the town meeting warning. Tom has provided a sample. I believe the board has gotten my email. About other potential articles. Off the bat. I know we were gonna work on wording. I don't love the wording for the library reserve fund. But if I'm alone in that venture, I can move on.
I think it needs to be changed.
Did you find out, did you get any feedback? As to
Yeah.
whether or not the library trustees can?
Not a reserve fund, they cannot, but they are in control of all the funds, anything that's donated to them, any. Programming and that kind of funds that are given to the library, not, the clarification. If it's raised by taxes, it's controlled by the select board. If it's not raised by taxes, it's controlled by the trustees. So whether or not they have a reserve, and I think. Last I talked to Gene this morning, is that. They already have a fund. And it's just a matter of, is the wording for that right, and then who dictates how it's worded.
What do you mean they already have a fund?
Well, the library has their own, just like the historical society has a fund. You know, and so they already have an account, if you will. So it just has to be clarified, you know, so they're working on that part. But any money that comes from donations or sale of books or endowment, that kind of stuff, controlled by the library. Anything that's raised by taxes controlled by the select board, and there is language to make a reserve fund that I got from VLCT, and it just needs to be combined, but I was waiting on the library to see if they even wanted to move forward. Now they have more clarity, or they want to move forward with this or not. They might not want to do it, who knows?
Move forward with what?
Creating a select board controlled reserve fund.
That's why I was
Is it-
wondering why we had to make a motion on it, but. I guess if they wanna nix it, we could nix it.
Well, I think for now it's still on there, it's just working on the wording.
I don't think the wording to be controlled by the library trustees.
This wording should not be considered tonight. It has to change. It's not legally binding.
Did they get the signatures for this?
No, the board
No.
made a motion to add no. Let's just agree. that-
I thought we were gonna initially, we were gonna ask them. To go put their own together and get their own signature.
No, we
Did I
did,
lose something?
we did make
You
a
did.
motion in a meeting to include an article. We did not make that motion specific to the wording of the article.
Correct.
Right.
And I think just know there's probably gonna be an article and it's still in the works. Maybe plan on January 6th.
The thing is, Michael, is we should really hone in on this because they can go get something that's illegal, but you know, that doesn't meet the statute, get the signatures and we have to run it up the flagpole for a vote.
And we'd be in the position of standing up and saying, oh, by the way, the wording isn't legal.
Right,
Right.
which
Yeah,
the voters can amend on the floor, am I wrong?
they could.
Warrant article, no.
I don't know.
Warrant article, no.
I mean,
Really?
No, no, otherwise they'd be amending our budget.
I thought they have in the, okay, so I'm not wrong about that. Whether it was kosher or not, I think it was
I
done.
think you should talk with Dave Williams about that. If it's a warrant article. And it's in, it's printed that way, the argument can be made. I didn't go to the meeting because that's the way the article is worded and that's how but if I had known that they were gonna amend the article, I'd have gone to the meeting.
Right, that's
The New York City statement was amended on the floor and printed on it.
What was?
New York City statement was amended on the floor, it was submitted by petition and it was printed and amended on the floor.
But that was in an advisory article. Yeah.
I don't know, just know.
In the essence, we're,
No, it wasn't advisory, because the select board had passed it. And this was an appeal. It was a substitution, so the select board had previously done. So it's not advisory.
so
you can call that.
are there other articles the board would like to see proposed wording for? I guess we're not getting into the verbiage. Tom said he's gonna rework, or Rosemary's gonna rework, you're gonna work with Rosemary on rewording?
Well, I'm gonna work with you guys. I'm gonna, once
So
I,
you're gonna work with the library too.
exactly. And so I just met with the library this morning. They're gonna decide whether what they have an intent for this fund. And let's make sure what the VLCT said to word it as matches their intent. And if it's probably gonna be yes. And then you're gonna come back to you and say, hey, guys, this is the suggested wording for VLCT, and you're gonna say, okay, add it to the warning. I mean, it's pretty, before I go to you guys and say, oh, this is how we should word it, I felt it was most appropriate to go to the library and make sure it was still matched what they were asking for.
And to make matters even more complicated, I don't know if you guys read the statute, the amendment that Tom forwarded. On the library, and to me. That is very clear. It says, I don't remember the exact wording, but it says that the library trustees shall be in control of the money, the buildings and the grounds, property, whatever. So to me, right now, in the property was deeded to the town, property and building were deeded to the town. Not the library trustees. Under a strict reading of the change of the statute. I don't think that's accurate anymore. I think the library trustees are in complete control of the property, buildings and grounds. And it sort of begs a whole bunch of questions on what we're doing over there.
Exactly.
Whether, I mean. But by the way, we don't have a deed for that property yet, do we?
No, I reached out to Dylan LaFlemme to try to push that along.
So one of the questions is, should that deed be to the Johnson Public Library or to the town of Johnson Selectboard?
I think when we get to that point, that's when, that's when probably somebody from SPF is gonna have to make a determination on what the intent of the law was, right?
Yeah, I think we should probably seek that opinion ASAP, because even all of those issues aside, even if they stayed where they were. If you read the statute. As I read it, at least, it says the library trustees are responsible for all that stuff. It does also clarify that they're supposed to, if they're seeking town funds, their budget should be included in the selectmen's general budget. But once that budget is approved, then the library trustees get to spend the money. They get to spend the budget. But, to me, the part of that change of the statute that caught my eye was the part about, buildings and grounds and responsibility for maintenance of buildings and grounds and stuff. And in the past, we have always assumed, because the building was deeded to the town, that was a town responsibility, and I'm not so sure it is anymore.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's gonna be a town responsibility either way, unless we cut it out and have them go in front of the voters in town meeting.
But the difference would be if there are building improvements needed to it, it would be in their budget, not in our budget. The taxpayers are ultimately still gonna pay.
But their budget is in our budget.
It is, but there's no line item in their budget right now for, capital improvement. Is there?
There is, yeah.
It might require a change to how they're thinking about doing it. Yes.
And I think,
You're leaving.
yeah,
You gotta go.
Are there any articles you want that weren't mentioned in the email? All right,
Take this out. I think it's super critical that you get that deed moving along.
I did, my last
So
email,
things can take forever, and we're moving that building in April,
I
which is 4 months from now.
or
emailed Dylan,
we're gonna have
just
a
said,
lot of expense to make up for it.
let my last email said, Dylan, can we just put our 2 lawyers together to draft a deed and get this done? That, stop going through, rather than me going through you guys seem copacetic, and the library and the school board is copacetic about having the library have that. It seems like, but if the 2 lawyers just talk and draft a deed, it's gonna be a lot faster than trying to work through.
But Mark is absolutely right. We need to get that done. I mean, we're making all kinds of plans.
Yeah,
And we don't own the land yet.
yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I'll tell you what, I find it a lot more effective to call somebody than to email them. But that's just my personal experience in the world.
Call tomorrow.
Just call them up and,
It's gonna be Christmas Eve.
yeah,
Dinner.
say, have a sense of Duncan's urgency in
You
your.
gotta go,
voice.
Peter?
I do, yeah,
Yeah.
my other job beckons and family arriving.
Thank you.
So-
Have a Merry Christmas.
Sorry,
You
sorry.
too, thank
Merry
you.
Christmas. Happy New Year.
Okay, I'll-
Merry Christmas.
You want a pizza to take with you? I got kids.
So
Thanks, Peter.
that does need to get addressed, but that's not what we're talking about right now.
Can I ask one question? You had one item in your potential draft, and I think maybe this is a Rosemary or Tom question. It was, shall the voters authorize the select board to appoint rather than elect a clerk? I'm good with the treasurer. I absolutely agree with that. I'm not sure about the clerk. And the only reason I have a hesitation about that is honestly, if Susan would be the clerk, I think you have to be a resident of the town from which you are running for a position in order to get elected.
If you're
as clerk.
running for it,
Correct.
yeah.
If you're
Yeah.
running,
If you're running. So that would be, if Susan is willing to do it, I'd be more inclined to ask the voters to authorize the select board to appoint. Because then we could appoint her as the clerk.
I believe my question was appointment versus elected official for town clerk, appointment versus elected official for town treasurer. And then there was 2 other reserve funds.
Yes,
So Does the board want to go to the voters? I was hoping Rosemary would be here tonight to give us her thoughts. I think this is the year to switch to an appointed town clerk and an appointed town treasurer, and both of those are separate articles.
They are, and my response is. Absolutely, let's have Rosemary here. Personally, I'm less inclined to want to include an article about appointing a clerk. Unless we have some sense as to whether or not Susan would be willing to be that appointed clerk.
And if she says no. What's your response?
If she says no, my gut feeling is clerk should be elected and the treasurer should be appointed.
Well, did you say that reverse?
No,
You say treasurer should be appointed.
The clerk should be elected.
clerk is the only single acting officer.
Oh, yes, yeah, okay, I was hearing that in reverse of the way you were saying it.
Sorry.
I apologize.
Yeah, the Susan business is kind of muddying the waters here a little bit because this was discussed years ago about appointing a town clerk because of instances in a few towns throughout Vermont that people were elected town clerk and they didn't show up for work. And there was no vehicle to terminate them because they were elected. So that's why the board years ago had brought this up to appoint the town clerk. So if the town of Johnson had that difficulty with a town clerk that was not fulfilling their obligations, we would not have to wait to the next town meeting to vote them out. And that was the main reason that we were talking about this when I was on the board previously.
But for me, there are other concerns than that.
So,
There's competency. You know.
Well, yes,
Pool
but
to hire
that was
from?
one of the reasons, Mark, that
Yes,
was used.
pool to hire from.
so given Duncan's question. Can we have Tom find out if there's or should select board member talk to an existing employee? To see if there's willingness for that employee to take over the clerk position?
And maybe it's a moot point, maybe Mike is right, maybe we shouldn't, maybe it shouldn't be a consideration.
I don't think it should be. I'm glad you somewhat concur, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, I would love to be able to appoint Susan as clerk, because she's very competent and she has a really good background in what the job requires, so to me, it's a no-brainer that we would appoint her if voters agree that it should be appointed rather than elected. And it may be a moot point, the voters may say, we want to elect them.
Just so the board knows, if we move to appointed clerk and treasurer, we need to do some work in February with Rosemary to make sure we have a contract in place following town meeting, so that way there's no lapse in.
So, yeah, and we need to explain to the voters our thinking that, yes, we're moving forward, this isn't gonna happen.
Yeah, and I think Rosemary, at least has indicated in the past that she would be very supportive of the idea of appointing a treasurer. I'm not sure that we've asked her what her thoughts are on a clerk versus a treasurer.
I can't remember that specific
Yeah,
question.
so I think it would be prudent for us to ask Rosemary what she thinks about clerk versus treasurer.
So right now, can we have verbiage for those two things added? We can nix an article very quick, right? Rosemary's preparing these, correct?
It is, but it comes right off the LCT.
Okay,
I think I'm just gonna send it the language.
but there's no. I mean, we talked about this with Rosemary last year. I just wish she was here to.
Me too.
Well, she's gonna be doing the 6th thing,
Yeah,
so
when
we can finalize a warning on the 6th.
I asked her, on this, like, oh, where's the article? And she's like, I'm not making that decision. you know.
It puts her in a real.
It's gonna be hard for her to get that put in front of all the meetings too, like if you
Yeah.
guys want it, do it, you know, I think. But I think that's hard for her to have to do that too.
It is. On the other hand, if somebody asks her at town meeting, what do you think about this article? And she stands up and says, I think it's a really stupid idea. You know what's gonna happen.
Absolutely.
Whatever.
As a matter of fact, I think she could have a big raise.
What happens will happen.
That's the only thing we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, give raises.
Set the rate of compensation for that position. The other two items that were sent out in the email were. Not sure if the board remembers this, but the planning commission asked for a reserve fund to be
But or
commissioned, or
I don't know if I saw that.
you're at the meeting,
Oh,
and I sent it in a couple different emails.
I meant
You
to
don't
read
read
it.
that.
You missed it.
I can send you the email.
How much
if
do
you
they want?
but-
Did they ask for? a
Yeah.
number?
I mean, specifics, I can't remember. This was, Mike got on the board and said, you guys don't have a class 4 road policy. What have you been doing? And we worked on one, but Paul was here at the meeting, I believe,
Carolyn's there, I didn't know who-
Charlie doesn't count. Kim Dunkley. I believe, was Daryl West there as well?
Kim was there,
Yep, and
Darrell was.
Daryl West, I think, was there, I believe. And
Who was advocating for money?
the request was to start a class 4 road reserve fund. So that when repairs came up in the future, we would have some way to pay for them. I don't know how the board feels about it. I don't know how to fund it. All I'm saying is we're all there when the request is made, and I'm bringing it back up.
Well, I'm sure it's just some kind of a vehicle there to push the board along to do something. Would you say?
Probably.
Because the deal is that we never do anything about class 4 roads to speak of. We talk about it and everything else, and we blow a bunch of smoke, but nothing gets done. So I guess if you have a reserve fund, it kind of pushes the select board to do something with it.
Well, we have an annual line item for class 4.
I thought it was class 4 road labor. That's the way it was worded.
Yeah.
Or no, it's labeled class 4 road maintenance.
Yeah,
That we allocate $2,500 a year on and never spend in the recent future.
right, so that would be the reason to do a reserve fund, is to take that
And roll it
$2,500 at the end of the year and roll it into a reserve fund if we didn't do anything that year.
If nothing else, I mean, it would set up a future board in a better position to be able to afford a project.
And it'd give us, we need another reserve. fund.
We don't have enough.
I have a love-hate relationship with them. I love that there's planning that goes into it. But we have a lot.
I'm totally in favor of having an article to that effect,
You,
Yeah.
and I would.
Yes,
can verbiage be added? What was the other one in the email?
I had it up.
It was beautification reserve fund.
Beautification,
They have a petition, don't they?
do they,
Do they?
to establish a reserve fund?
I saw that somewhere. But if you guys just add it. they don't
I mean, the
do it.
question went to you about different vehicles and you said a petition is an option, but was there any expression? Because you had said the select board could add it as an article, you could sign out a petition, you could do this, you could do that.
I'm going from memories. I thought they're getting a petition. If you guys want to add it right now, they don't have to go. I'll just send them an email and say they decided to add it.
I'm not trying to tie anybody. It was a request that came to Tom and I to be brought in front of the board. I'm just bringing it up.
Did they talk about it when they appeared before us at our last board meeting? about
No.
having-
they had a perfect opportunity.
Yeah, they didn't make any specific suggestion, and. In the past, if they have grant funds that are gonna go from one year to the other,
Rosemary kind of puts them in,
those end up
Hold
being
over.
in the checkbook.
certainly. If the board's not in favor of it, that's fine. we were asked to bring it to you, so
So find out if they're getting your petition together. Again, because petitions make me nervous that they're gonna turn out to be
the verbiage is,
illegal and not copacetic and want 50,000.
What do you think, Tom?
I caution against too many accounts. And can this be added? Can you amend like building and grounds? Or amend a different fund that we already have to accept that account? You know, is there like another way to do this that we already have rather than having a reserve fund for every account?
Yeah, I mean, like the community oven has rollover money every year.
And like, to me, that should
That's
go to
just-
like building and grounds, and then you say, okay, we know that the pizza oven added 10,000 because you can account for it. And then 10 years down the road, you want to do an addition and let's use that 10 grand we added.
10 years down the road, who knows who will be, if we'll even be able to find it,
That's
for what it matters.
do I think they should save money for bigger projects? Yes. But my only caution is having, I think Duncan hit the nail on the head, but it was a joke, but it was like having too many funds.
you've heard me say it several times.
Yeah. If there's a good way to track, I'm not opposed to the idea of sort of amalgamating funds as long as it can be really clear, like. The bread oven, put in $10,000. I don't want the beautification committee to be able to rob the $10,000 that the bread oven put in there.
That's all Rosemary's accounting. We just trust her.
If Nemrick was set up clean, you would hit a detailed transaction, and next to that X number of dollars, you would have a memo. So all within the computer, you'd say, oh yeah, there was like 15 additions over the last 10 years. And the memos are all lined up, and you'd see, okay, like bread oven, okay, and it. So you can, if you use the software well, it'll make it clean.
You're absolutely right, the key part of what you just said was if it's set up right in use of memos. You gotta put the memo in. If
There is
the memo
user,
doesn't get put in, then nobody knows, 5 years from now. Nobody knows.
I believe Charlie had a question.
My question is, why is the beautification committee, a town committee and not a village committee? Since all their work is in the town.
A good question.
There's a lot of questions like that. Why is the community economic development person doing all their work in the village?
Really economic development, what's your name? I don't know. You answer it. You just, I can't do it.
Well.
Because it was brought to the select board.
Yeah.
I asked that question a while back, to one of the beautification members, and they said that they were doing more stuff in the town. For the town.
Take people.
But I agree, I think it should be a village entity.
I haven't seen any of the work outside of the village. And all the proposals are in the village.
Sometimes they're on town property.
Like where?
The trailhead building, we just approved a sculpture over there. It's in the village, right? But it's town property. Here. Joint property. The library.
Are we close to adjournment?
Last one I have to bring up, it's a good question, Charlie. Thank you. Last one I had in my email was, do we want an article? An advisory article from the voters to see if we should. I don't know how to word it, split town properties and sell town property down Railroad Street. Maybe y'all know what I'm talking about, but I don't know how to word it. Talked about this in a joint meeting.
just clean it
The
up.
village garage being solely owned by the village and subdivided out, town garage being solely owned by the town. The village would like to sell the 180 acres, I believe. But
And they would like to sell the old mill house too, right?
yeah, but it would just be an advisory article. Going back to the voters and getting their opinion on the matter.
Well, we've discussed that over the years. Anyway, without an advisory article.
But we can't possibly act on it without voter approval, would this give us?
I mean, this doesn't really give us approval. This just says if you guys do 6 months worth of work, we're not gonna spit in your face.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I think it's kind of, yeah, at the end of the day. If there is an actual proposal to sell property. It requires a public notification and any. Okay. Certain number of voters, 5 voters can ask for a public hearing, a public meeting.
And then a public vote.
Up there, not
At the
public
end of
vote,
the
and whether
day.
to sell or not sell.
Probably some people in this room will not live long enough to see that all sugared off.
And it's probably me.
Let me take your pulse here, Michael.
So,
I don't see.
well, we're not getting into wording. We're talking
Yes.
about possible articles,
I think that's a great article.
but how's the rest of the people feel?
I think it would be great to have a sense of the voters as to whether or not. They even want us to go down that route.
Because they have
So,
defeated the
yes,
sale
okay.
before.
That's perfectly fine.
But. We all know that public opinion can change from one year to the next, or actually one day to the next.
It can, but I.
But then again, I do agree.
Yeah.
I think we should, it's just like you said, that lets us know that we're not gonna get dumped on 6 months down the road if we do a lot of work on it. Why do you waste your time doing that for? If we get a clear consensus, voters, that we should do this, then we should do it.
Yeah, if it's, looks like it's a 50-50 deal, well, we probably don't want to spend the time doing it, but if it looks like it's a large. Number of the voters that think it's a good idea.
That's the only one that's not very clear on how to word, but you get the sense.
I'll throw mud at the wall and you guys will paint it around.
Are there any other articles the board wants to propose tonight? We're gonna look at this again on the 6th, I imagine, and maybe the 9th. We're not gonna sign it until after we have a budget anyways.
If I'm not mistaken, Mr. Chairman, several years ago, there's an advisory vote by the voters for the town to look into amending the ATV ordinance. It started to go along pretty good, but as time went on, there was not much stomach to do it, and I believe I made a motion to dig into it, and it died for lack of a second. So I would propose that we add, shall the voters direct the select board to amend the town of Johnson's all-terrain vehicle ordinance dated June 19th, 2006 to remove section 4C 1 through 3 and replace as follows. Section 4C1. The use of ATVs/UTVs are authorized on all town roads located in the town of Johnson.
That's a very specific wording. How's the rest of the board feel? I would put it back on the voters. It's an advisory article.
I don't even want an advisory article. I want an article that means us to do business.
I don't think you can do a binding article on an existing ordinance.
It'd be nice if we could.
No, it wouldn't.
It'd be a lot of-
It has nothing to do with this. It just wouldn't be good
Pizza.
to have them be making, have voters be bringing out petitions for whatever the whim was. I've been through that.
How's the board feel about getting consensus from the voters on the ATV ordinance amendment? Probably not gonna make any friends or.
But the point is that we need something that puts the select board's feet to the fire. Because invariably, there will be 15 to 20 people that are totally anti-ATV that will show up and try to stare the board down. And then when this happens, the best laid plans of mice and men fall by the wayside. So what good's it gonna do? Even if it comes down. Then it comes down to the board. The board is, if 2-to-1 people in the town. Want it all opened up to everybody, all the roads, then the board could just say no. Really, what good would it do? We need something with teeth in it. So if the voters want to change the ordinance, we have to do it. What should we do? Should we work on a new ordinance and go through the whole ordinance process and incorporate this language?
I wouldn't support the language as written.
What are your thoughts?
I could conceivably look at amending the ordinance, but I don't see it as an either or situation. Either we have the ordinance that we've got, or we open up all roads in town. I just don't see it as an either. I don't honestly think most of the Green Mountain ATV Club even necessarily wants all roads open. I would be much more in favor of a targeted approach where there was, dedicated roads, and honestly, I would like to see the ATV Club try and do some trails on private property, so that they don't have to use town highways. Much like the snowmobile clubs did, back in the day.
Yeah, you understand, Michael, one of the issues with this could probably pass. One of the issues we've run into is there's no enforcement. There's no way to enforce it already. So,
There's no enforcement for our parking bans anymore.
right. But Mike, that's been one of the stumbling blocks all along is, okay, we open up all the roads. Already they run up and down past Duncan's house anyways. So, maybe you're right. Maybe we should just open them all up. But I think we should find out, do they want this? Are you getting this from the ATV club? They want all the roads open?
This is just something I put together myself.
Okay, because I think Duncan's got a valid point. Do they want all, you open all the roads up in Johnson, the following year, there'll be a petition that says no ATVs in Johnson. Because they'll be going everywhere down Railroad Street, and you'll find that, I think that if they're smart, they would ask for a selected number of roads to be open. Maybe they want more.
They have in the past.
Yeah, they wanted to go down Gould Hill and not Clay Hill, which has always been perplexing to me. Meaning if you're at the top of Clay Hill, come right down Clay Hill. Now, maybe the people that come to the studio center don't want ATVs running up and down Clay Hill.
Well, I did a little research, and there's quite a few towns in Vermont that have a similar thing as this. They open up all their roads.
I know, in Bakersfield, they have a $10 permit. You get a sticker if you're gonna run on the roads in Bakersfield. And it works out very well.
Isn't it Bakersfield that also limits in theory, limits to town residents?
I don't think so. Town residents may not have to buy the permit. I have the ordinance, I can figure it.
We
Well,
could turn it into revenue.
it's all over the place. I know of towns where the ATV clubs have approached the selectmen and said, we'd like to get, these targeted roads, and we'll build some trails, to make this all happen. And that's all they want. They actually don't want ATVs out on other roads.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what a lot of Northeast Kingdom towns are that way, where you go to the select board for 1,000 feet to connect this trail to this trail, but they are only allowed on the road for this portion or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, which,
Well, we have some of those kicking around.
yeah, I think I don't know, I personally think this should not fall between neighbor versus neighbor, and this should go right to the commissioner of the DMV, and are you gonna regulate ATVs as a motor vehicle or not? And if no, then we should move to trail systems, and if not, if they are gonna regulate, then let's just allow them all over the state everywhere, you know, but it seems like, I don't like how it's kind of tears, every community gets torn apart over this topic. I don't like that.
I think the legislature did a fantastic job of punting.
Yeah,
What else is new?
I'm open to the concept of an article advising the select board to do something. At least then we have the will of the voters.
I don't think it,
I don't know if I'm married to the language. I'm fine with the language, but I would be open to other ideas on the language.
I think you should run it by the ATV club if they want this language. Do they want access to every road in Johnson? They
You
may-
could certainly ask them.
They may find that shoots themselves in the foot and the head. Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah.
Is the board amendable to, I'm fine with you asking them.
Sure. I'll ask.
I mean, all they've really asked for consistently is to to connect both sides of Johnson.
Bakersfield should put $10 sticker.
We should charge $20 for the sticker.
I agree.
Well, our ordinance right now requires them to license their ATVs with the town. You got and to have a sticker, any idea how many people actually do that?
Does it require them to license it with the town? I thought it said VASA registration. It's state.
It's a bad registration, but I believe they're supposed to get a sticker from the town.
I think you can get that from VASA online.
I don't know.
But
But then
whatever.
again, it comes back to enforcement. I mean, they can do whatever they want right now anyways.
Yeah, they did provide us with their directed enforcement using Fish and Wildlife or whatever, and they were honest with saying that Fish and Wildlife wasn't heavily keen on patrolling non-open areas. They were keen on patrolling open areas and making sure people were abiding by the speed limit and not riding without helmets and yada, 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 but I think enforcement's big on, every ordinance that we have.
Like weight ordinances.
No, that's not a form-based code.
Mr. Chairman, I am not,
Solid waste.
I'm not wedded to this, exact wording either.
Is
So as long as in concept, it,
the board open to the idea of a directive? Like I said, we can scrub it quick later, but if Tom's preparing some language or working with Rosemary, we're open to the concept, not married to verbiage.
I just think you should ask them, like,
well, that's
Yeah,
that's going without saying.
He said, it-
But I mean, we're just, as long as, people have an open mind, that's all I'm looking for.
I
Are
think
there-
they should be on all of them.
any other articles?
It should be on all roads. Yes, you said?
Yes.
Kevin? So I was looking at the budget, speaking of articles, budget. There's nothing on here, at town meeting last year, they added money for river arts. It's not in the budget.
I saw that too, and I didn't bring it up this meeting.
Was it petitions?
It was petitioned last year
And that's-
and passed with flying colors.
No,
Maybe we break out appropriations.
I don't touch them, you know. They don't, that's just, they don't raise the tax, they raise the tax rate, but.
Penny and a half.
Over it, yeah.
Roughly,
Yeah.
not the 7 cents that the library does.
Yeah.
Oh, certainly, yeah. It's $1,500 if I remember correctly. Was it more? $2,500?
It'll be a new year. if the grocery store goes away.
Why am I the one looking this up? Shall the town of Johnson vote to raise, appropriate, and expend the sum of $1,500 for support of river arts to provide services to residents of the town? And it passed at 2:31 PM.
And my guess is that the person who put that in will get the money if they're so inclined.
But historically, if the voters voted on an appropriation, we tucked it under appropriations. There was a policy about this. I'm gonna have to look back at my emails. It was the minutes.
The year that the voters cut the budget by $30,000, I believe,
Yeah,
then all of the articles were. The discussion in 2017, December 17th, 2018. There's a long discussion about, a short discussion about what the articles mean. And I have the impression that you're gonna do some.
maybe that's a spot we
You can
could,
adjust them.
maybe that's a spot we got 20 grand. Give or take. I'll have to read that. Can you send those to me by chance, if you have the minutes?
Tell you where it is.
You'll send it to me. You'll send it to me via email?
No, I'll send you where to look in the select word minutes, text it.
Sounds good.
There is a written policy.
That's where I would need to check my email because we went through this whole conversation 2 years ago. We went through it again last year. And I believe last year, was it you that sent me the policy?
Could
Maybe.
be. Could be. It's a written policy. And I think it's in the policy book.
Do we follow our policies all the time?
Some,
I don't think we followed our procurement policy earlier this meeting, but.
No, he's gonna get it down to $3,000. He's gonna get it down to $3,000. It's gonna be,
All
he's
right,
gonna get it to $29.95. It's gonna be. under
all right,
$3,000.
sounds good. Any other articles?
Let's go.
There's nothing else.
Get into a cooler.
We're
place.
calling meeting adjourned to 8:20. Have a wonderful night. Merry Christmas, happy holidays to
Merry
everybody.
Christmas. Been out here.